It's the day after Nice, and following yesterday's sombre time trial, the Peloton is back together with the French national champion on the front with the other leading jersey wearers as the race returns to the open road, heading north through the Rhône-Alpes. It looks like another windy day, so don't rule out some action affecting the top of the standings, but it should really be a duel between the sprinters teams and the Breakaway. And the Breakaway today has 4 men in it. Martin Elminger of I Am Cycling, Jeremy Roy of FTJ, Alex Howes of Cannondale and Cesare Benedetti of Bora Argon. As you can see, they've got a lead at the moment of around 3 minutes 55, just hovering around 4 minutes. Hello, we're in a bird park of all odd places for the finish of stage 14. And not only that, but our brilliant caterers, Philippe, Romain and Odette, cooked guinea fowl for lunch. I ate men in the OB truck so as to minimise offence. Now, yesterday's time trial shook things up at the top. At least it made the time gaps bigger from Chris Froome to everyone behind him. There it is. He now leads this race by 1 minute 47 from Bauke Mollema. Adam Yates is at 2 minutes 45 in third place. Nairo Quintana 2:59 in fourth. Alejandro Valverde at 3:17. TJ Van Garderen 3:19. Romain Bardet, the leading Frenchman, is at 4:04. Richie Porte 4:27. Dan Martin 5 minutes 13 and Fabio Aru 5:16. So the gaps are spreading, and Chris Boardman, especially between Chris Froome and the man we all expected the big duel with to be this year, Nairo Quintana. Is that now not going to happen?
Well, I think that we're past the worst days for Quintana. So ahead of him is the hills, another summit finish. I think he's got potential to move forward onto the podium, but really difficult for him to challenge for first place now, that's for sure. He did an okay time trial, nothing startling from him. Pretty much what you could expect, really. There were some surprises in the time trial. Chris Froome's was quite a solid performance, not the best he's ever produced, looked quite heavy in that time trial, but he was okay. I think big surprises for me are the likes of Richie Porte. You know, I really expected more. He was totally lacklustre, and he's slipping away when I thought it was going to be a big comeback yesterday. Well,
you say solid from Froome. Yes, I mean he didn't come close to Tom Dumoulin, for example, but he did more than enough, depressingly, for everybody chasing him to put more time into them.
I put it, you know, for him at his level, it was like a really good, solid workman-like performance. Slightly overgeared, not having a really enjoyable time. I don't think. You know, it wasn't really the best time I've ever seen, but it was certainly good enough. He's done a couple of days of reconnaissance on this course. That probably paid dividends with all the twists and turns, particularly with the wind. So a very professional performance from him.
And what about Bauke Mollema? He's not someone. He was there. He was quietly in the top 10. We weren't paying much attention to him. We're forced to pay some attention to him now and to pronounce his name. Can he hold on to that? Can he stay on the podium?
I think, judging by his performance, not just at the time trial, of course, but in the last mountain stage where he was actually attacking, went across to the breakaway pretty comfortably, and is cool as well. He let them ride away and then jumped across in his own good time. It was a much more mature performance than we've seen before from him. He's been thereabouts for years, but this is the first year we've really started to see him put those performances together day after day. So I would say very strong odds on him being on the podium.
Okay, well, as I say, it shouldn't be a general classification day today, although it's dangerous to say that on this tour. Let's take a look at the stage 14 map. There it is, back on the flat and back up over 200 kilometres, 208.5 to be precise. The intermediate sprint has been and gone after 63. And on the run-in to this, we should see the sprinters' teams chasing down the sprint. It was certainly a sprint when the Dauphiné came here last year. Nasser Bouhanni won that. He's not here, of course. Mark Cavendish still is, and starting to sound as though he might be staying all the way till Paris. He spoke to Daniel down at the start this morning.
Mark, we talked the other day about wind in Carcassonne. It was a tailwind that day. Today it looks like a headwind all day. How's that going to affect the race?
Be a long day, like that's it. And the finish, we're going fast anyway. I think gear choice is quite important, but apart from that, it's just going to be a long day. Like, who wants to go on a break 200 kilometers in a headwind, you know? Hopefully someone does, and we can kind of control it. Otherwise we're milling along and people start saying it's a protest or something again. So.
We're getting into the third week of what's your 10th Tour de France now. How are the tiredness levels compared to previous tours?
Yeah, obviously it's better than my first ones. I'm older now, so I'm a bit more resilient, but it's not been easy in the mountains this time. I haven't specifically trained for the mountains this year, so they kind of took their toll on me a bit. But I didn't get through them for nothing. We'll try again. There's obviously 3 more sprints we reckon now, so we've got to make the most of all of them.
Cheers, Mark.
The thoughts of Mark Cavendish trying to stage win and identifying 3 more opportunities, including today, to do just that. And one of them, of course, being on the Champs-Elysees. And David Miller will get over to commentary very soon, but I can assure viewers there's nothing going on at the moment. An average speed of 33.5 kilometres an hour. It's great to hear and see Mark Cavendish talking so, convincingly about his ambitions of taking it all the way to Paris.
Well, I think he's a racer, and this has always been one of the most important races for him. And the fact that he's breaking records and he's sitting there, and it's in sight now. There was just 1 month ago when he said that he's never going to do that, and now he's doing it, and he's making his way towards it. And he's got the Olympics on the very close horizon, and we're all debating, what should he do? Should he go to Paris, or should he stop and get ready for the Olympics? So it's very, for all of us, I'd personally love to see him go to Paris, and I think many of us would, but at the same time, he's going to have to make that decision.
He is indeed. Let's go over to race pictures now, and just to prove our point, let's have a look at the peloton in slow-ish motion. There is the yellow jersey on the shoulders of Chris Froome once again. The breakaway up the road have an advantage that is hovering around 4 minutes. It's not got anything like a huge advantage today. The biggest gap that these 4 riders have managed to eke out over the peloton has only been 4 minutes and 30, so they're just being held, dangled, call it what you will. It's going to be a long, hot, hard day for them as they battle their way up due north, up the Rhone Valley. And that's a famous house. That was designed by a, what do you call it, an outsider artist by the name of Christian Guillard in the little village of Lens-l'Estagne.
Yeah, it's the Rainbow House, and before that, which was just missed in vision, was this thing called the Palace of the Postman, which was nuts. It was bonkers. This postman that spent 33 years building this bonkers house, and it looks like something from Malaysia or Indonesia, and just this sort of a work of art, but quite strange in the same. But we just missed that.
Thanks for telling us about it in retrospect.
I actually had some facts that aren't on the screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it was a sight, but I'm afraid you missed it. Instead, you're treated to the side of a bike race, and eventually today we're going to get one. It's going to be a super showdown. There's an absolute guarantee of that, I would say, at this point, and you can see by the representation at the front of the peloton exactly who's interested in today. Dimension Data, Ethics Quickstep, Lotto Sudal. So that means Mark Cavendish, Marcel Kittel and Andre Greipel. And more. Let's not forget about the likes of Brian Coquard and Dan McClay, still in this bike race. 187 riders are still in this bike race, just 11 abandons so far, including the team leader of the man you're looking at, Jérémy Roy, who is one of the most important domestiques usually for Thibaut Pinot, especially on the flatter roads. But he's released from duty looking after Pinot today because yesterday Thibaut Pinot didn't start the race. So he's one of the 11 who are out. Everyone who finished yesterday has started. The diminutive figure of Cesare Benedetti, he's in a breakaway for the 2nd time. He was up the road on stage 2 in the company of Paul Voss, his teammate, who hasn't made the breakaway today. And the other 2, apart from Jérémy Roy and Cesare Benedetti, are Martin Elmiger, 37 years old, the veteran Swiss rouleur, and a potential GC racer back in the day, but those days are a number of years ago. And a man you know very well, David, Alex Howes, 28-year-old American. We saw him up the road on stage 1 in the company of Anthony de la Place, and those 2 were the last men standing, if you remember, on that run into Utah Beach on a stage that was won by Mark Cavendish. And so Cannondale Drapac have got themselves in the break today, 4 teams represented.
And I think that's becoming one of their tactics, as unfortunately for them, Pierre Rolland is slipping down the general classification. They have to go back into being a team that reminds everybody of their existence by being in breaks. And they're doing well with a rider like Alex Howes, who is a wonderful bike rider. We see him, he's probably the only rider left in that team that was part of the original Formation Junior team when he was 15 or 16 when Jonathan Waters started that. So he's gone through all the ranks and is now world toured in the Tour de France, and that's all thanks to the development team they had back in the day. As you see Mark Cavendish on the back here, and this, I mean, I hate to say it, although I will say it, it's for us watching this, we can say this is quite boring, but for the racers, this is almost a recovery day. They get to sit in the wheels. It's a headwind. It's very controlled. They almost know what's going to happen. It's going to be a bunch sprint. They'd have known that from a couple of days ago when they were following the weather reports. They knew where this route was going. It was going north, south to north, almost in a straight line. And the wind is relentlessly from the north, and it has been. That's what's been affecting the last few stages as well, because that's meant a crosswind, because the race has been coming from the west to the east. So they anticipated from that today was going to be a bunch sprint. And that's for as we saw, Lotto Sudal, Dimension Data, and Ethics Quickstep on the front. This whole stage is planning out perfectly so far. And these 4 riders, they're doing this. Jeremy Waugh, who was, I think it was in 2008, the most combative of the tour, the whole Tour de France. That was his first tour, I think, and he was off the front. It seemed like every single day of the race, and he's quite an interesting character. He studied engineering at university. He's one of the bigger brains in the professional cycling peloton, very well educated, and but beyond that, we did think that maybe Jeremy Waugh would do this, do that, and we haven't seen him in many breaks since. So I think for him, this is a very important move. It was an opportunity today. It may seem like it's a move that is destined to failure, but all the same, for them, it's a productive move for their own personal reasons.
Yeah, he's a rider you expect to see in a breakaway. Quite right to point that out. I think his first Tour de France, he finished second to Sylvain Chavanel on stage 19 as well. Remember that particular race? That was very close. He was quite emotional at the end. Big day out for him, but it's been a number of years since we've seen the best of Jeremy Waugh. Won the hipsters race of choice these days in 2010, the Trobreau-Léon, which is for some people the most fashionable race to follow in the year. But it's got its unique identity, that race, and you have to be a hard man to win it too.
No, it does. It's a bit like the Froome we have in Italy at the beginning of the year. It's origins of Eroica. The white roads, the Strada Bianchi, and there is a race called Strada Bianchi now in March in Italy, where they go on the gravel roads in Tuscany. And now they're doing that internationally for people to take part in. You get dressed up in old-fashioned clothes. You're not allowed to use a bike that's younger than 1987, and it becomes a bit of a festival. And yet those races are becoming more and more fashionable. See the Giro doing it in France. They have Trobreau-Léon in Brittany, where it is a race which a lot of it is on gravel roads, and it makes for great viewing, and it does make for a very hard race and fun above all, I think.
So FDJ are flying their flag up the road. 4 minutes is the ever unchanging advantage. It seems to be absolutely firmly shut down at the moment, that gap. No incentive whatsoever for the sprinters teams to pull it back at the moment, and these 4 are just enjoying it while it lasts. Eventually, of course, the pace will come up, the gap will begin to tumble, but we're a long way from that point. That said, for the first time today, we tick under 100 kilometres to go. At an average speed at the moment of 33.5 kilometres an hour. Do your calculations yourself about how long this race will last, but be assured that in the final hour of racing it'll go right up over 40 kilometres an hour again, despite the headwind. That is battering the race all the way. They go just one direction today, and that's north. Up the Rhone River Valley, past the iconic fields of sunflowers, blessed with clear blue skies today. The Tour de France on very familiar turf here. It's the Alps tomorrow, but on the way up to the bird park of the finish, it's rolling roads and flat terrain all the way. Welcome back. Peter Sagan in the green jersey, just off the back of the race at the moment and just rolling on. Not quite sure what's happened to him, but no big dramas from the green jersey. Ahead of him, Fabian Cancellara, a cluster of FDJ riders. It's Ethics Quickstep, Lotto Sudal and Dimension Data who are controlling the pace at the moment, and 3 minutes and 20 seconds is the advantage. So a little bit has been shaved off what they're allowing the breakaway to have at this point of the race, with 95.3 kilometres to go. Lars Bak on the front, doing the early work for Lotto Sudal. Nathanael Berhani for Dimension Data on early duty, and Peter Vakoc. They're the 3 riders controlling the pace for those 3 teams. And right there in the middle of your screen, in the white jersey and the German national band, that is Andre Greipel, whose birthday it is today, 34 years old, so happy birthday to him. But he has failed to score so far on the Tour de France. He was attacking last time we saw him on the race on Mont Ventoux, effectively trying to set things up for his teammate on that day, Thomas de Gent, who went on to win the stage famously up to Chalais-Renard, even if his victory was somewhat overshadowed with all the events that happened afterwards, with the extraordinary sights of the yellow jersey running.
It's the castle of Montséveroux, built in the 13th, 14th century. Now he's a school in the town hall. I'm wondering whether they put the stands up, forgetting that they had a wall in front of them, if that was for the race.
Well, it looks like they've got some sort of stage on open-air theatre event going on. Got the weather for it as well. Even though this weird wind that's been hanging around the race for so long now, it's what's the fourth straight day of a Mistral, and it's just exceptional. It started off as more of a westerly, but in recent days it has just turned round and headed straight from the north, so straight in the faces of this where this race is going.
Yeah, it's quite rare at this time of year to have a Mistral blowing to this degree, because normally it's a little bit, from my experience from bike racing, a little bit earlier in the year, but it really has been consistent the last 4 days, 5 days, and consistent in direction and strength. It's obviously as went a bit further south, it rotated a little bit, but no, I think everybody was anticipating this stage was going to be like this from a few days out. And the temperature as well, it has been, normally when you go down into Provence and the south of France and even Languedoc-Roussillon, in July for the Tour de France, it's one of the places where the Peloton hates being, because it is stiflingly hot. And yet this year it's been quite temperate, which probably is due to the Mistral blowing. So the wind's bad, but the temperature's been good.
Yeah, bright, hot sunlight, but if you step into the shade sometimes and into the wind, it's really quite chilly on occasions. We've been fascinated by the thermometer in the car as we've made our transfers in the evening, dropping to, what, 10, sometimes 8 degrees, hovering around the mid-teens most of the time. Very unusual for July, the south of France. Picking up feedbacks, the 4 riders. Martin Elmiger, just popping something in his back pocket for use later. The biggest of these riders up the road, 37 years old, former winner of the 4 days of Dunkirk a number of years ago. Martin Elmiger for I Am Cycling. I'm not sure what Elmiger's fate is either next year, whether he's decided to ride on and whether or not he's got a ride, because all the I Am Cycling riders are moving on one way and the other, because that team is one of 2 from the World Tour which are disappearing.
And just to pick up on that, Ned, 4 days of Dunkirk, which is actually a long-standing race in the professional cycling peloton, is actually 6 days long. It's one of those classic quirky things of professional cycling. To this day, it's still called the 4 days of Dunkirk. And you turn up on the Monday to race till Sunday.
I've always thought, David, that any race that uses that kind of title, 3 days of or 4 days of anything, must be just a slogfest. They tend to be brutal, don't they?
3 days of Depana, which is
3 days of Depana.
Yeah.
One of your favourite races on the calendar, wasn't it?
It was, actually.
For perverse, masochistic reasons.
Yeah, it was. That's up in the west coast of Belgium, and it is, I think, in professional cycling renowned as being one of the bonkers races you do. It's in between the Milan-San Remo and Criterium International and Flanders. It's the week before Tour of Flanders, so it's in that period of the year in April, beginning of April, where it's the heart of the classic season, the Cobble Classic season, and it was the race you went to normally to get through and survive, and if you finished it without crashing, you considered that a success. You didn't care on your results. It really is, I think, it's still one of the most fun races, but you did go into it resigned to your fate that it was going to end badly.
I wonder how today's going to end for Andre Greipel on his birthday, 34 years of age. Just thinking back for the Giro d'Italia, actually, it's funny how these riders' birthdays fall on their biggest races of the season. Marcel Kittel turned 28 on the Giro this year on a stage that he could have won. He was hunting down his 3rd win into Benevento on that particular occasion, and it was a difficult parcours. There was a little climb before they got into the town, and then the actual finish itself was a bit of an uphill kick. And Kittel had done a phenomenal amount of work, and his team, to bring him back into the race, only to find that he punctured in the end and couldn't contest the final.
We're seeing here the classic, the leader not taking his feedback, but one of the domestiques taking it for him. So that's obviously been an order or protocol they're adhering to. Even though Roland's dropping off the GC, he still remains a leader, and they don't want him taking the feedback to avoid risk. And yet he's at the back of the peloton, where it's a reasonably safe place to do it. So, yeah, the rules are still in place within the team about how you treat Roland and what to do at the feed zone.
The hulking figure of Marcus Burkhardt gets to the front from BMC. How many times have we seen that over the Tour de France so far this year? Little hand gesture there.
That was the 2 fingers up to get 2 feedbacks.
Precisely for that reason that you just said.
Yeah, so that he'll be giving that to Richie Porte or TJ Van Garderen, or for both of them.
Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen and their continuing duel for supremacy, and BMC was one of the fascinations of yesterday's time trial, and it produced a very unexpected outcome. Because Porte attacked that time trial like there was no tomorrow and seemed to be taking chunks of time out of TJ Van Garderen and eating into his advantage relative to Richie Porte, but in the end Van Garderen rode a much better time trial than Richie.
Yeah, and interestingly as well, we saw it, and from the time checks we saw, he stormed through the first one. He was, by the end of the race, 3rd, which was a great first section, but then he dropped off massively between the 2nd and 3rd time check, then sort of settled. But I think when he got to the finish line, he didn't even realise that he dropped off.
No, that's right.
From what we've heard and the interviews he gave, he was really satisfied with his performance and wasn't aware of the fact that he dropped off completely, which does happen. It doesn't, just because we see it so clearly, doesn't mean that the rider feels it.
Well, for those of you at home who like to sort of plot your way around France and understand the geography and the layout of the land, we're heading north, but the Alps are to the right of the race as they go north, and not too far away either. The race finishes just to the northeast of Lyon, France's 2nd city in many ways, in the heart of the country. And it passes today through a number of different départements. France, don't forget, has 101 if you exclude the ones that are overseas. So it starts in the Drôme, moves where they are now through to the Isère, nips into the Rhône department, back into the Isère, back into the Rhône again, and we finish in the département de l'Aisne, which itself has a famous bike race you were telling me about this morning.
Yeah, Tour de l'Aisne, it's one of these smaller stage races in France, one of the French smaller stage races. There are quite a few, and there used to be lots more, but there's not many left, and it's in August, and often it's used as a preparation race for the Vuelta a España. It's 5 days, and this region, because we are, as you said, the foothills of the Alps, you can go into the mountains from here, and it's a bit like Route du Sud, which the Dauphiné Libéré we have in France, and Tour de Suisse, and there's the 3rd race, which Nairo Quintana, who we see on the screen, he used Route du Sud this year as his preparation race for the Tour de France, a 3-day Pyrenean race. So these races exist.
Thanks for that, David. We'll take a short break and we'll be back with the action when we return. Welcome back. The advantage is now under 3 minutes with 89 kilometres to go. So still the peloton is being led by Dimension Data Ethics Quickstep and Lotto Sudal, and still the 4 riders struggle into a headwind. And last time we caught a glimpse of them, the tiny figure of Cesare Benedetti, there he is on the front, was doing all the work with the 3 bigger men just sitting on his wheel. He really is, he's not exactly a giant, is Cesare Benedetti. The King of the Mountains at Tirreno Adriatico this year. He was on the podium day after day there, and every time he got onto the podium, he insisted that the podium girls took a step down and didn't join him on the top step because they utterly dwarfed him otherwise.
Good man.
Yeah. Keeping his pride intact.
It's always the worst case scenario when you're in a breakaway and you're with somebody of different sizes. I used to have it because I was quite tall for a cyclist. You'd find yourself on a break with little guys, and you're tucking, so you look like a wally trying to hide behind them, trying to get any slipstream whatsoever. But
yeah,
to their benefit.
Absolutely. Now, they're going through very flat territory at the moment. They have been over 3 categorised climbs today, and just saying that, actually, they are just going over a little bit of a roll. Yeah, just to bring you up to date, 3 categorised climbs. They've all been done. They were all Cat 4 climbs. Thomas de Ghent, before the breakaway got away, picked up the first one. And then the breakaway have shared the other 2. Alex House taking 1 point and Cesare Benedetti taking 1 point. So the King of the Mountains has extended his lead. He now has 90 points over Rafa Maika's 77 in 2nd place. What do you know about the castle of Louviers?
Just a little bit, Ned, which I should speak to my wife about, as she's into horses, but it's a private castle, and they have horses and other animals from the horse family raised there. So I'm not sure what that means, and I'm sure people will get in touch, but I wasn't so aware there were many other animals in the horse family apart from horses. But the castle of Louviers is private, and
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many of the chateaux that we feast on during July are not privately owned. And so many of them were taken into, if you like, state ownership in the French Revolution, sold, given over to the state, and are now part of the national monuments. But this one belongs to someone. A tractor enthusiast, obviously, a bit like Chris Boardman.
You've got
and your
beauty at
sons.
the front, yeah, and hard work at the back.
And the advantage just goes out again, 3:16. I was beginning to wonder why they'd shaved off a minute and a half so quickly, because they really don't want to catch them anything like at this point. The catch surely won't come until well within the final 20 kilometres today.
Well, I think we discussed this earlier off air. That was the fact that even a day like this, where it started so slowly, and because of the headwind, they did a 30.4 kilometre an hour average in the first hour. Even the peloton at some point wants to just get the day done. And I'm sure that's part of the reason we see the peloton thinning out at the back, going into a more elongated shape. And that's because, I mean, I think even for the cyclists, they although it's an easier day, they get to rest. It also, the longer it takes, the less rest they get afterwards. So I think they do want to get it done, and this has got as much to do with that as anything else.
News on the race as well. Bad news for Matthias Frank, the team leader for IM Cycling, Martin Helmiger's team. He was doing okay actually in GC in the Pyrenees, holding on to that group of favourites pretty well, but he has abandoned on the route today. He was in 31st place in the general classification, 44 minutes down. So it's the end of the road for Matthias Frank. So we're down to 186 riders now. 12 have abandoned, and that's still a very, very small number deep towards the end of the second week.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's because so many made it through that first week. It was, by Tour de France standard, quite unaffected. It's quite difficult to ascertain why that is, but especially when we hear so many complaints about how dangerous it is now, and yet, ironically, we ended up having one of the safest first weeks when it came to abandons that we've seen in many years. And I think it's normally the first week which has the greatest effect on abandons and through the race, and because so many made it through there, it takes a little bit longer now for people to get tired and worn out.
Well, that message speaks for itself. France is still in 3 days of national mourning, and the Tour de France takes its opportunity to join in the international sentiment. As we look at the long train of Team Sky looking after the yellow jersey of Chris Froome, I can tell you, and I'm very pleased to tell you as well, that to help us out on this long day in the commentary box as well, very shortly, I believe we're going to be joined by Dave Brailsford again. The Team Sky principal is on his way. I've been told he's in the building and hopefully will be with us very soon. Could be a big day for Mark Cavendish, of course, as he hunts down an extraordinary fourth stage win, if that's possible. He's already flagged up the fact that there are actually 3 more opportunities for a bunch sprint, including Paris, including today. There's another one as well on Monday into Switzerland, in a race that finishes in Bern in Switzerland.
Bern, the hometown of Fabien Cancellara, so that's going to be quite special, doing his last Tour de France and actually going to his hometown. So it'll be interesting to see if he does anything around in the days around that day.
And I'm pleased to say Dave Brailsford has joined us, and he's sat down and he's got his microphone switched on, and hopefully all is well in his world. I'm sure it is. This is so far been a pretty perfect Tour de France for you, all racing incidents aside, and we're going to talk about them, I'm sure, in detail. But yeah, you look at the general classification this morning and all is well in your world, I would imagine.
Yes, it is, and I think there's I guess in many respects there's an easy way of getting a 3-minute lead or so, and there's over Quintana, and there's the Chris Froome way of getting a 3-minute lead, which is somewhat different, I guess. And it's certainly been an eventful race for us, and very exciting, and a lot of fun, I've got to say. It's been really, really enjoyable in terms of the way that the race has panned out, the way that Chris has taken his opportunities and raced more, and And it certainly had its moments. I didn't think in our, I've got to admit, in our scenario planning, I didn't have running up Von 2 in the yellow jersey with no bike as one of those scenarios, got to say. But he managed it terrifically well.
I can't believe you didn't think that through with all your preparation.
I know. Yeah.
Just to let you know what we're going to do now, we've been joined by Dave Brailsford. As you can see, 83.8 kilometres to go, 3:22 the advantage. There's no sprint for another 20-odd K. So we're going to take the opportunity for a few minutes just to leave live pictures. If anything happens, we'll come straight back to them. But we're just going to run in the events of 2 days ago on the roll into Chalet Renard and get the Brailsford eye view of what was happening here. The moment Richie Porte hits the back of that motorbike, all hell breaks loose. What were you aware of at this point, Dave?
Well, I saw the images the same as you did there, and you know, it's pretty obvious straight away that Richie'd ridden into the back of the motorbike, and the question was, for me, was why did the motorbike stop so quickly? And then, you know, it's like, then you've got to say, I'm going to hold it together here. That is the best thing I think I've ever seen in a bike race.
This is what for me, Dave, that's what I thought.
That tells you more about Chris Froome, that moment there.
Yep.
Than pretty much anything else you'll see. He is just such an unbelievably exceptional human being. You know, he's just.
But he's actually quite. Dave, at this point, he's relatively calm. Okay, he's done the running thing, which would suggest, you know, wild over exuberance and emotion. But the way he just stops, he sees the Mavic car at this point, and he thinks, well, this is my salvation. And then he gets a bike, of course, that doesn't fit his pedals.
There is no rules, is there? There's no previous experience to pull up much here in this type of scenario. It was just, it's intuition, and I think that's what's kicked in there. And his intuition is, I'm going to go get to the line.
See,
I'm going to race.
One of the things I thought when it was all happening, I thought how rational he was. Because when you know bike racing, you're in that situation. He knew that the car was 2 minutes behind. He knew what the scenario was. He was going to lose time. So the only thing he could do is to save time was move forward. And for me, it wasn't an emotional decision. He was like, I've got to save time. I have to move forward.
I think for a lot of people in that type of scenario, you know, you've seen people throw the bikes away and really, you know, have a bit of a fit at the side of the road, etc., etc. Why has it happened to me, sort of thing? This is crazy. He didn't. He headed off for the line,
and he didn't care how he looked. You can see him shaking his head. He he looks like what he looks like.
That pedal. When you, I mean, we've all done that.
He's not clipped in.
He's not clipped in.
He's on a bike the wrong size. He can't. It's impossible. And yet he doesn't give up. He doesn't He doesn't throw in the towel.
That's him all over. You know, there is so much more. I've spent a lot of time with Chris Froome, and there is just so much more to this guy's character, and he's one of the most unbelievable human beings I have ever met. He really is, and he's so tenacious, and he's so with it, and he's an incredible competitor.
What was he like? I mean, you know, we saw the immediate aftermath where you were all waiting for a long time. We'll touch on that as well with the decision of the jury that eventually came. What was he like that evening? I mean, did he realise he was in the middle of a storm?
Well, we've over the years, you know, we've done, I think it's no secret, we've done quite a lot of work with Steve Peters and how do you manage, you know, the difference between emotional and logical thinking, and how do you manage these types of situations. And what we know is the goalposts move, you know, and people get upset and they go, oh, well, the goalposts are moved, and they get emotionally upset about why it moved and how it moved. It's not fair, etc., etc. And what we've done over the years is trained ourselves time and time again to recognise it's not if the goalposts move, but the goalposts will move. And when they do move, be the first to react to it in a logical way. And don't let emotion drive your decision making. Don't let emotion drive your thoughts and your behaviour. Come back to logic and really try and be logical and calm in those situations. So we all switched into a calm mode, and we'd already seen this day and the time trial as a 2-day block. So essentially we saw it as one, you know, the morning of Von 2 to the end of the time trial for us was one joined up seamless kind of event, and we wanted to gain time in those 2 days. So really we were halfway through. It was like half time, if you like, in using a football analogy, and so it's a question of taking stock, and we thought, right, the best way to deal with this is to remain calm. We can't change what's happened. You know, the judges will make their decision, and we felt that actually fair play would be carried out, but the judges will make the decision. We'll go with whatever the judges decide, which we did, and we'll then start thinking about recovery. What do you do for tomorrow? How do you get a bit up to be the best you can be? How do you get the little run out of his legs? You know, but really, you're back into that. Let's get ready for the time trial. Nail the time trial. What that mishap today, might have spoiled, you know, a couple of minutes in that race. And okay, it was highly talked about, it's spectacular in that sense, but physically, it was only a very short period of time when you consider the whole race. It's a minute amount of time. So the next thing was for us is, right, let's get back on track and let's nail tomorrow. Whatever we do, let's nail tomorrow, and then we'll talk about it. We didn't even talk about it at night. We said, as a group, got everybody together, said, we're not going to talk about this, we'll talk about it after the time trial, because we all wanted to talk about it, you know? But
Yeah.
you just discipline yourself and off you go, and you nailed a fantastic performance yesterday.
We're back on live pictures, as you can see, and while we've been examining the extraordinary sight of the yellow jersey running up Vaughan with Dave, fascinating insight from Dave Brailsford just now. You've missed nothing, just to reassure you that. 80.5 kilometres to go. The breakaway still has 3 minutes and 35 seconds. Dave, what happened after you crossed the line? What's the process? It took a long time, didn't it?
Yeah, it did take a long time. And so basically what happened was you have two groups, if you like. You have the event organiser, the ASO, who obviously are in charge of rider safety, you know, the overall putting the event on and crowd control and the yellow jersey protocol and all the rest of it. And then you've got the referees, who essentially make the decision independently, and they're independent of the ASO, so the ASO can't influence them. And so there's a couple of things really. I mean, none of us had been in that situation before. Nobody really knew what was going to happen. And so I went to see the ASO, went to see Chris first, obviously, and then went to see the ASO, as did my counterpart Shane Bannon. And spoke to him. This is a bit of a strange one, really, and we all recognised, and I think it's fair to say that the wind conditions obviously changed the course. So fundamentally, the whole route had been changed. Taking off the 6 kilometres from the top of the climb did cause them a challenge in terms of they couldn't get all the barriers down. They had a lot of people in the last 6k who then walked down to real kind of concentrate the crowd, if you like, to a denser crowd than normal in that particular area. And we recognise that, you know, and you think, OK, well, these guys are up against it in terms of the event they're trying to put on. We understand how hard they try. And so it wasn't an issue, certainly for me anyway, in terms of what and why and how and looking to point a finger. It's a question for me was, how do we move on? Where do we go from here? And then the UCI judges get their heads together, and independently they come up with a decision. They make their decision, and I think it was difficult for them because in exceptional circumstances, they had to sit and think about, well, how are we going to judge on this? And there's nothing in the rule book which kind of, you know, can take that into consideration. There's no rule or article that says actually when the motorbikes stop, everybody rides into the back of them, yellow jersey starts running off up the road, what do you do? And so they, to be fair to them, they're left to their own devices, but they then have to decide, do they apply the letter of the law as such, or do they apply more the value system and then apply the law to that? And I think it seemed to me that what they decided was based on, look, we recognise this is out there as a situation, and I think they thought that fair play should be the right way to approach this. So through the lens of what they considered to be fair play, they then interpreted the rules and went from there. And I've seen a lot of people say that, you know, I went in there and ranted and I didn't at all, you know, and I didn't speak to.
Did you have your say on their way into? You know, did you state your case as they entered their closed room? I'm sure that they reached that. I mean, was
no.
There was no lobbying.
No, you can't appeal. You can't. You know, anybody who knows cycling commissaires, I guess referees in general, really know that they're not going to be told what to do, and nor should they be. You know, and I don't think they should be influenced by myself, the teams, or everybody else. It should be independent, and they independently. You know, there's a group of referees. It's not one guy, and then they went off and discussed that for a while, and they came back with a decision.
David, were you impressed with Adam Yates' reaction?
I was impressed with Adam's reaction massively. To be fair, massively. And he was. So there was a lot of talk about Chris and I going into where the referees were and the ASO. It just didn't happen. It's just absolute didn't happen. Chris went off to do the media. After the media, anti-doping, and in anti-doping, Adam was there with him. And Adam was as cool as a cucumber. He was the coolest bloke there, to be fair to him. And really, really good. And he just sat there and, well, you know what? I don't really want the jersey in these conditions. And then the ASO spoke to Shane Bannon, the head of Orica, and asked if, okay, this is the jury decision, is everything okay? And he was like, yep, 100% okay.
What about Trek?
Didn't speak. I don't know whether the ASO. Then I know they spoke to Movistar and a couple of the other teams, but I mean that's their business, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't there with them talking to people. So
I was really impressed by Adam Yates, because I think that was, for a young guy in that situation, then to stand up and say when he's on a different team.
Well, do you know what? Essentially, because that's in bizarre circumstances, that's extraordinary circumstances. It's the second time it's happened to him on this Tour de France. I mean, you know, if things had gone another way, when the Flamme Rouge collapsed on him, poor lad, he would have been in the yellow jersey. So it's twice now.
Yeah, and I think you know, credit to him, and what that tells me is such a, what is he, 23? If you're dealing with these situations, and you know, on the global stage, as it were, and you're taking it in your stride, you're not letting it knock your performance, and he keeps coming back every day and performing fantastically well. Wow, what a prospect! You know, he's certainly got the head for it, and he's certainly impressing everybody, certainly within the teams, and I'm sure within the peloton.
How's Ian Stannard doing? You see him on screen now.
Yeah, he was banged up actually after his crash, and he's talking to the Welsh there. Yeah.
He's just, he knows you're on, Dave. He's asking for a pay rise.
That his boss is sitting here watching in public.
I'll have a word later. What you doing, was she? And where were we?
Ian Stannard.
Stannard's injuries,
So Ian had a really bad injury to his back a short while ago. You know, like quite a significant injury. Yeah. And so he took a long time to come back from that, and his concern was that he'd done something to his back again. So we took him for an MRI, and he was a lot of pain when he came back. And we didn't think he'd finish, actually, but it's incredible that he actually finished. He was in a lot of pain afterwards on a bus, and got him to hospital, and they scanned everything, and it was okay. But he's still he's still in considerable pain, but he got up and he's battling on. And I must say, it might not be great for everybody, the headwind today and the impact it's having on the race, but I can tell you what, there was one guy who was super happy this morning that it was a headwind, because he knew he could sit in there and get another 24 hours, you know, relatively easily in the peloton, and that was Ian Stannard. So he's a tough guy. You know, those classics guys, they're tough, aren't they? You know, they're hard.
They're born like that.
Yeah, and you're going to need him. He's done a great job so far. So have Luke Rowe and Geraint Thomas. Geraint Thomas is extraordinary, isn't he? Because he crosses over, so he's part of your flat team and part of your climbing team as well, which is just such a rare thing in a rider.
It is, and I think, and we've said it before, haven't we? You know, that the breadth of Geraint's talent, if you like, is also it's a brilliant thing, but it's also quite a challenging thing to manage, because he can be good at everything, and therefore, you know, how does he manage that? And he had a terrific start to the season, and his win in Paris-Nice was phenomenal. And then he went into Milan-San Remo, I think a little bit, it's a big win for him, big moment in his career, Paris-Nice for Geraint, and then he pushed on after that, and probably just a little bit sick, didn't finish in Catalonia, and then he's come back, and obviously in Swiss he was just a little bit below, or a little bit, wasn't quite where he wanted to be, but and then the first day here, of course, he crashed, and we thought he had suspected broken ribs. So been a tough start for him.
We're running out of time, David, as I'm sure you're aware. We'll let you go in a minute. Chris Froome, when I spoke to him before the race, he was actually talking about the Vuelta. I mean, would that be a thing that you would like to see, Chris Froome? Because it's unfinished business with him, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's funny, as I'm sure Dave will know better than I will. I think, you know, the start of the tour, everybody talks about the Vuelta and the World Time Trial Championships, and you know, TTT, Team Time Trial Championships, and then the further into the tour you get, the worse and worse and worse that idea seems to be.
You know, we were talking about that before,
exactly.
November.
Yeah. So I think Chris's plan is that he would, but I think at the minute, let's see how we get on until the end of this race, and come up for air after that, and then off to Rio. See if we can put a good performance in there for Britain, and then we'll take stock and see where he's at for the Vuelta. But it's certainly in the plans.
Good Lord, what a year it might be all round, and what a race we've still got to look forward to. Dave, appreciate your help. It's a long old day in the commentary box today. We've got 74.5 kilometres still to go. 4 men still out there. You've got a team to look after and a nice team bus to go and sit in. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Great to see you guys. Keep up the great work.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Cheers, Dave. Thanks. So Julian Alaphilippe is just making his way to the back. If anybody saw that extraordinary picture of his crash yesterday, my word, if you didn't know it already, these guys are brave men. And Alaphilippe, well, go on to social media if you haven't seen him flying through midair towards a rock face, because there's no other way of describing it. That's what happened. How he's still in the race, only he knows. Little nod from Alaphilippe, 74.1 kilometres remaining. The sun is out, the wind is up, and eventually, I promise you, we'll have a race on. Welcome back. Jeremy Roy leads the pack of 4 with a 2-minute and 30-second advantage over Lars Bak and all the rest of the peloton. You can see Mark Cavendish buried in the middle of the front end of the peloton there in about 12th position alongside Marcel Kittel, and Andre Greipel also in close proximity. And it is all very much under control as the quartets up the road continue to battle the Mistral that is slowing the Tour de France down today. They actually pulled the race forward, anticipating the weather conditions, and got the start going a little bit earlier, knowing that the average speed would be slow today. I think the wind is just beginning to drop a little. But I mean, those flags are still very active, but nothing compared to the gale force winds we've had over the last couple of days. Yesterday was extraordinary, and the day on Mont Ventoux, well, we know exactly what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it will weaken a little bit the further north they go, but at the same time, it's a headwind's a headwind, and it's and at this point in the race, you can see that the race essentially is completely in control. They don't need to go much faster, the peloton. It's 2 minutes 20, 71 k's to go, a headwind, and we have 3 teams in the front there, Dimension Data, Ethics Quick Step and Lotto Sudal, controlling the race for their sprinters, respectively.
And there's one of the sprinters who might feature today, right at the back, Dan McClay from Fortuner Vital Concept. What a race he had back on stage 6 when he finished 3rd behind Mark Cavendish and Marcel Kittel into Montauban. An extraordinary result. And he, much like Adam Yates, totally different kind of rider, of course, but making his Tour de France debut, which isn't the case for Adam Yates. But Dan McClay seems totally unfazed by the circus around him, by the attention suddenly that he's getting from international media. A completely new name for many on the sprinting scene. And he seems absolutely as if he's taking everything in his stride.
Yeah, and it's a weird situation now, whereas a few years ago, being the British rider getting success would have been the story. There's a British team leading the Tour de France with a British rider. There's a young British rider laying in 3rd place overall in the white jersey. You've got Mark Cavendish breaking records. You've got Geraint Thomas, and so he's part of
Steve Cummings,
just one of them. Yeah, Steve Cummings, who's won a stage, and so in a way it has to be probably a blessing in disguise in many ways. He doesn't have to deal with a massive amount of pressure and expectations, because it is spread around.
Yeah.
But what he's done so far is phenomenal. That 3rd place, and not just any 3rd place. It was so close that when he got that on that stage, and it goes to show that there are, to use the word that Dave Brailsford used regards Adam Yates, there's huge prospects for Dan McClay, and I'm sure many of the World Tour teams are spotting that, because at the moment he's not on a World Tour team. He's on a Pro Continental, the Division 2, if you like, of professional cycling.
Yeah, one would imagine he won't be hanging around there for very much longer if he continues to ride like he is. Certainly one to look out for in today's bunch sprint, which we're all expecting and looking forward to, because it's been a while now since we've had a bunch sprint. Montpellier was, in many people's eyes, a nailed-on opportunity when we dropped out of the Pyrenees and went across that flat part of southern France. Everyone thought Montpellier equals sprint. That's what always happens. And in the end, well, that extraordinary combination of Chris Froome and Peter Sagan with Geraint Thomas and Mathieu Bodnar ripped up the textbook and eluded the bunch sprint. Alexander Kristoff winning what remained of the placings and taking 5th place on that stage. Mark Cavendish on that day was out of the reckoning anyway, having suffered a mechanical on the run-in, so he couldn't even contest that sprint. 3 wins for Mark Cavendish so far. All got going on Utah Beach when he beat Andre Greipel and took the yellow jersey on stage 1. And then he was at it again on stage 3 into Angers. Again, it was ahead of Greipel, much closer on that occasion. And 3 days later, in stage 6, he got himself his 3rd win. And there you can see a graphic just showing you exactly how the wind is aligned. Most of the day, they are facing a northerly wind. And then Marcel Kittel, he won stage 4 in between Cavendish's 2nd and 3rd win into Limoges, ahead of Brian Coquard, and that was the slimmest winning margin of them all. Just 23 millimetres separated Brian Coquard from Marcel Kittel on that long uphill drag to the finish line in Limoges.
I think that graphic gave a perfect example of how the wind can affect a race, because a few days ago into Montpellier, when we saw Peter Sagan and Christopher Froome off the front, Chris Froome off the front, that was a 35, exactly the same wind, 35 kilometres an hour, but from 3/4 behind, and that just ripped the race to pieces. Now we have exactly the same wind, but in their face, and it shut down the race. So you can see, probably apart from mountains, because mountains are obviously have a shocking effect in the race, it is the wind generally that really does change the dynamic of a race from kilometre zero.
Well, that's what people forget about cycling sometimes, isn't it? They, focusing on the tyres and the road, but actually it's a battle against air most of the time, and some people have described it like sailing. Yeah. So it's how the air moves around the bike that's what makes it hard or easy. That's what gives you a chance or takes your chance away. There's still a little bit of a subdued atmosphere hanging around the Tour de France, it has to be said, after yesterday's respect that was paid to the victims of Nice. Just slowly, people are remembering that this is a bike race. And in some ways, I think it is a respectful thing that this race has been relatively neutral up till now. And that so far, it's been a procession up until the business end of this stage, where there will be a serious effort to try and win the stage amongst the big sprinters' trains. 63 kilometres to go, that's where the intermediate sprint happens, and it'll be very interesting, probably quite revealing to see what happens there. They'll be sprinting effectively in the bunch for 5th place, and that means 11 points for the winner of that sprint. But I think they've probably all given up on the green jersey. Peter Sagan has a 90-point lead over Mark Cavendish.
It's the Castle of Septem, built on 11th century ruins. That's where it was first built. It's actually been owned by the same family for 250 years.
Is that one still in private hands then?
Yeah, it's still in private hands, which is quite amazing as well. This is obviously quite a wealthy area.
And a headwind for a group of 4 makes it impossible. The reason being, David, that's simply, they're going to run out of firepower, and the Peloton has so many more people who can get on the front and take turns at their disposal, whereas these 4, well, they're stuck with what they've got.
No, exactly, and we would have a rule within cycling. Actually, it's easier to do it this way. When you're trying to control the race, the sprinters teams, they won't allow a break of more than 6 go, because that becomes difficult to manage, because 6 becomes, they get enough rest, the rotation time is enough to give them enough rest to work harder for longer and not tire out. Now I think that's gone up to maybe 9 these days, the way professional cycling, where the Peloton's got strong. You see the strength of the wind there. How
it hasn't died down at all, has it?
No,
it's still a howling gale.
Head across. But so you'd often say in the team meetings at the beginning, for a team like Lotto Sudal, Ethics, Quick Step, Dimension Data, who want to control those 3 teams that we see on the front here, who want to control the race and keep it together for a bunch sprint. Their team orders for the first part of the race will be, do not let a break of more than 6 riders go up the road. And so what they'll do is they'll designate 2 riders for each team who will be at the front from kilometre 0, and if anybody attacks, they go after it and they just sit on. They don't work with them. And they can do that, and they'll just keep doing that. They'll wear the enthusiasm off the front of the bunch and all the riders that are going, to the point that when they'll go for 2 or 3 riders, 2 or 3 riders go, or 4 riders, 5 riders, the 3 teams will look at each other and go, we can let that go. So the teams, so those 3 teams, Lotto Sudal, Ethics, Quick Step, Dimension Data, they almost become one team for that first pass of the race, all defending the interests of their sprinters and their future work.
About 5 or 6 minutes before Peter Sagan will either play his card or not. I should imagine that Peter Sagan will try and get himself the 11 points at the line. Be most unlike him if he didn't race for a finishing line somewhere. And the intermediate sprint is the next point there for him. two very similar but reversed-looking national jerseys there. Don't get them confused. The man in the foreground is the Dutch national road race champion. He's a sprinter, Dylan Groenewegen, and Arthur Vichot is the man behind him, the French national road race champion. Red, white and blue, white and red. Frighteningly similar looking, but very different kind of riders. Groenewegen for Lotto Jumbo is a sprinter, and he'll be looking to try and contest the win, or get himself high up the placings on today's finish as he possibly can. Hasn't really worked out for him just yet, which is somewhat of a surprise because he's had his breakthrough year in some ways, scored some big results as Dylan Groenewegen. Yet to really feature in the final mix on the Tour de France though, which is, for many people, the only race that really matters in terms of exposure around the year. It's when cycling stands in the shop window and shows off what it's got. And sometimes that's fantastic, and sometimes it's confusing, and sometimes it's just bizarre. But it does make headlines, invariably.
We can see the wind here is slightly more head cross now, but you can see how different effect it has in a tail cross, because you get a lot more protection on the wheel in a head cross than you do in a tail cross wind. As you can see from behind, it's not stretched out, it's not strung out, because you are protected much more. The speed's lower, and it's a lot less stressful.
I should say another rider to look out for today is wearing the colours of Bora Argon 18, and that's Sam Bennett, who we believe is back to fitness. He crashed on stage 1, and he is the Lanterne Rouge, so he's the last man in the general classification. He's 3 hours and 11 seconds down on the time of Chris Froome, so I don't think he's going to be winning the Tour de France, but he might be featuring in a bunch sprint, the Irishman. He has battled his way back to fitness. Did he break his finger, or certainly injured his finger, and that's caused him a lot of discomfort, but he is back to his best at the moment. So just over 1 kilometre to go for the 4 riders until they get to the point at 63k to go, at which they will contest or not an intermediate sprint. None of these riders feature in the green jersey competition, so it's just a little bit of prestige and a few quid in the pocket if they can get over the finishing line here at Lafayette first. Alex Howes takes them through, Cesare Benedetti on his wheel, and the big, vastly experienced Swiss rider Martin Elmiger, and Jeremy Watt also over 30. Jeremy Watt, been around a good number of years. Benedetti, well, he's more of a climber, as you can see from his physique, and features quite often in breakaways. 3 times in a breakaway in Tirreno Adriatico, the week-long stage race earlier on in the year, getting himself the King of the Mountains jersey. And Alex Howes just flexing his back, the American rider for Cannondale Drapac. We saw him in a breakaway with Anthony de la Place on stage 1. And de la Place and Alex Howes were the strongest of the breakaway riders that day, and they were the last men standing before they were finally swept up by the sprinters teams on the run into Utah Beach in a stage that was won by Mark Cavendish. What's going to happen here? Do you think there'll be a little... Have they already decided who's going to take the points and the money here? Or do you think they'll just see what happens on the line?
I'd imagine they just roll through, because they've been out there all day. They're having a very hard day, the 4 of them in the headwind, knowing that it is a little bit of a lost cause. So it would be surprising if they sprinted out, but at the moment cycling is always surprising, so who knows.
Yeah. Cesare Benedetti's doing the sensible thing now and sheltering behind the 3 bigger men. Now that camera shot, actually, Benedetti looks interested, doesn't he? So he's spotted a little opportunity.
Let that go.
And we've got a full-on sprint, which is rather more fun than we imagined. 100 metres to go. Benedetti's got a little bit of a gap, but he's got 3 big men chasing him down. A glance to his right, and I think he's cracked it. Alex Howes, though, hasn't given up. He takes 2nd place, does he? From Jeremy Watt with Martin Elmiger in 3rd, but Benedetti takes the intermediate sprint and 20 almost completely irrelevant points in the green jersey competition.
And Benedetti will now be the most disliked guy in that breakaway, because I think you got the impression that the rest were quite happy just to roll through gentlemanly, and Benedetti jumped them from nowhere. And so yeah, that's the beginning of the end of that breakaway in many ways.
Well, it never stood a chance, did it? Not with this lot bearing down on them, but maybe what Benedetti has done has just shortened their life expectancy. Now, Etixx Quick-Step with Marcel Kittel and Peter Sagan in the green jersey on his wheel are moving up on the right-hand side of the road, so we're going to have a little sprint for 5th place by the looks of it. Where's Andre Greipel? He doesn't appear to be interested. And Brian Coquard is the other rider. So we've got Cavendish, Sagan, Kittel and Coquard who are going to try and duke this one out.
And you can see what happens here. You see Sagan drops, he's speaking to Mark Cavendish. But what Ethics Quickstep would normally do, Tony Martin's leading, is move slightly over to the right of the road, because you see it's a crosswind, and by that way Marcel Kittel is protected. But at the moment they should be further across, because at the moment Sagan and Mark Cavendish have enough room to be protected. Brian Coquard's just on the limit. And it looks like Tony Galopin for Lotto Sudal there to defend the honour and just mark some points. But
yeah, Lotto Sudal sending a rider up the road just to try and snaffle points away for Andre Greipel, but it's all a little irrelevant, I have to say. Now, who's going to move? I think it's Lars Bak. Yeah, he's been doing most of the work on the front, the Danish rider. And Kittel still has Vicchese and Sabatini in front of him, his 2 lead-out men. So, the big blue train. And Mark Cavendish, well, he never fully contests these, does he, normally? Sagan does, quite often. The green jersey, he is unleashing his sprint with 100 metres to go. I think he's going to take the points, is he? Or the 11 points on offer for 5th place. Yeah, Marcel Kittel sits up, allows the green jersey to take maximum points. And as so often in that little group, that little trio of sprinters, Cavendish is content just to take the minor placings.
Well, that's interesting, because I think Peter Sagan knows that he can't beat Marcel Kittel and Mark Cavendish when it comes to the big sprint at the end. Look at Marcel Kittel, look behind. He's just checking Mark Cavendish and coming, he sits back. He knows he's safe, he's got the points. But I think for Peter Sagan, he's playing the long game regards the green jersey, and he thinks, right, I can beat you two, you're not going to compete this, I'll take the points here, because I know that when it comes to normally when it comes to the big finish sprints, you will beat me, so I may as well get the points where I can.
Some British representation on the road today. And there have been increasingly as we head towards the Alps. I think most of the British cycling population who go to the Tour de France favour the Alps. So the Union Jack has been sighted more and more often by the side of the road over recent days. Peter Sagan is off the front, but he won't be for long. That will come back together. The intermediate sprint has been breached. The next one will be the big showpiece finale. Welcome back to the heart of the action, so to speak, if there were any, which there isn't, particularly at the moment. That was an onboard camera you caught a glimpse of there on the Cofidis rider Jérôme Cousin. Be nice to get some more of that as the action heats up eventually. Lars Bak continues his job on the front for Lotto Sudal, and so does this young Czech rider, the brilliant prospect Petr Vakoč from Prague. Thoroughly engaging rider, really strong rider. He took a major win this year in his own right. He's in a domestique duty today, of course. But he won the, how are we going to say it, the Flèche Brabançon, or the Brabantse Pijl, or the Arrow of Brabant?
Flèche Brabançon.
That's your preferred pronunciation.
But it's in Wallonie.
It is in Wallonia. But it's a difficult race to win, that, isn't it? It's one of those, like, almost like an Ardennes.
It's a good race, because it's right in between the cobbled classics, the Flandrian cobbled classics, which are flat, and before we have the Ardennes, which kicks off with Amstel Gold Race, and then Flèche Wallonne in the middle of that week, and then concludes with Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which are much hillier classics. And Flèche Brabançon is the Wednesday before Amstel, and it's a bit of a bridge. It's straight after, 2 days after, I can't remember which exact classic, but it's a combination of
Paris-Roubaix, right? I think.
Yeah, you're right. It's Golden Price. It's 3 days after. It's the 3 days after Paris-Roubaix.
That's right.
So that's and then it's this nice bridge between the Belgian flat cobble classics and the Ardennes. So it's a combination of the two. It's quite a flattish rolling race, and then it finishes on a circuit with a cobbled climb. And it does actually suit the Ardennes, the hilly classics rider, more than the flat guys.
And there is this year's winner of the race we were just talking about, in second position in that train, Petr Vakoč. It was a really good race, actually. Michael Matthews was the nailed-on favourite for Orica Bike Exchange, a kind of parcours that suited him. Matt Hayman, who'd won Paris-Roubaix, just this is why I remember it, just a few days before, was on full domestique duty for Michael Matthews on that particular occasion. And Julien Alaphilippe, who is the other big favourite on the day, actually worked for Petr Vakoč and set up his win, which he executed brilliantly on that occasion. And Vakoč is definitely a rider for the future and one to watch. And a rider for the here and now, and he's doing a job today for Marcel Kittel.
They have such a spread of talent in that team, Ethics Quickstep. They don't although they have very big names in it, they manage to spread their wins across so many different riders, which is a difficult thing to do, and not many teams pull it off, because lots of teams get stuck into the methodology of having domestiques and a leader, and that's it. The Castle of Delphinal, 12th century as well. It seems like everything's the 12th century that we see in France of castles.
Although that's always the foundations, isn't it? Because these things get adapted and destroyed, routed, rebuilt. The stones get nicked to go and build villages from.
Also, many of them. This was one of them that fell into, was abandoned and fell into ruins in the 1700s, and it seems that during and after the French Revolution, I suppose, when they were sold off and people actually had the right to buy them, then they started to be renovated and rebuilt. And again, this was one of those.
And once again, France has shape-shifted. Very, very different scenery from what we've been accustomed to down in the deep south. And it has its own distinctive character. Beautiful day out yesterday, I thought, in the Ardèche with the gorges and that drive we had away from the finish line yesterday and towards the motorway and the big A7 motorway that runs up the Rhone Valley. That was exceptional. Very, very remote part of France. Very beautiful, though. Jeremy Alex Howes, Cesare Benedetti, who's made himself rather unpopular, and Martin Elmiger. I say Benedetti's made himself rather unpopular because he was the one who opened up a little bit of a sprint at 63 kilometres to go and contested the intermediate sprint and just disrupted the harmony within this group of four. Their advantages come right down now as well, 1 minute and 30 according to the lady with the blackboard.
Yeah, 1 minute 30 with 54 k's to go. And the way this, I mean, the speed's picking up now, but the wind hasn't relented, so they're probably average. You'd expect in the last hour normally in a stage like this one to have average in the high 40s, but I imagine it's going to be in the low 40s. So he's still got a good hour and a quarter of racing left, and the Peloton has only given these guys 1 minute 30 seconds. So whether the Peloton will slow down now or simply continue in its way and absorb them, I actually don't know. I'd imagine them slowing down slightly. So there's no need for them to continue a hard chase.
I think that might be Mont Blanc. Sometimes from this part of the world you're able with a long lens to pick it out in the distance on a clear day, and I think that's what we've just seen. Martin Elmiger and Jeremy Watt. It's the weekend, so the crowds are out. There is still evidence, certainly here at the finishing line, of enhanced security. You would understand that as well. Completely rational response to the events in Nice.
Yeah, I think we had to go through 3 roadblocks yesterday to get to the finish, which was a first.
In fact, the organisation of the Tour, the Gendarmerie, who are a permanent accompaniment of the Tour de France, yesterday actually sought permission from the Élysée Palace for the race to go ahead and consulted at the very, very highest levels about the validity of continuing with the Tour de France the day after Nice, and the decision was taken that the race goes ahead, and I don't think anyone disagreed with the manner in which it was carried out yesterday. Now this one, David, I understand has been used as a film set in the past.
It has, for the most obscure things. Camelot was the name of it, it was by Alexandre Astier and Alain Capalf in the castle scene, so I suppose it was a Game of Thrones for another era. But it's it's pretty fast. Again, 12th century origins, and owned by the King of France in the 1300s, and it became the property of the municipality of Saint-Quentin-Falavier in 1992, and Falavier being the local village. It was restored, like many of these, it was restored in the 1970s, quite recently. So,
well, often they're preserved by local groups and associations of enthusiasts as well, who do presumably fundraising and a lot of the hard graft themselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of these villages, the reason they're there is because of the origins of those castles. And then over the years the village builds and the castle dies, and at some point I suppose they have the resources to start to rebuild the origins.
Well, these three riders, Vakoc, Nathaniel Bahani and Lars Bak, have done all the work so far, ever since that break got away. Lars Bak's on the radio, just looking around to see what's coming up his way. I think he probably needs supplies being ferried up to him. And Cesare Benedetti further up the road, he's on the radio too, as the advantage for the four riders dips under 1 minute and 30 seconds. The catch is imminent, but they might have to dangle out there for a wee bit longer yet before the big sprinters' trains inevitably sweep them up and try and set things up for the big three. Mark Cavendish, Andre Greipel, Marcel Kittel, all in action today. Who's going to win? We'll find out in 51.6 kilometres time. Welcome back. The breakaway's just over a minute up the road, and we're back on board with Jérôme Cousin from Cofidis as we look at, I think that's Zabu Grumai, bringing water bottles up for Lampre Merida, and all the domestiques at the back end of the peloton doing their duty and bringing things forward. Bottles, energy at this point still required. The race is long today, 208.5 kilometres, but the racing, so to speak, hasn't really started, and just three riders are doing the work all on their own up front today. Nathaniel Bahani, Lars Bak, the Danish rider from Lotto Sudal, and Petr Vakoc from the Czech Republic. And there we go, we saw Lars Bak a little earlier on the radio asking for help, and there it is. I think it's Adam Hansen who's just bringing him a couple of bottles, because effectively Lars Bak is doing all the work on the front and he needs supporting at this point in the race as if he were a team leader. Andre Greipel is just making his way back up through the convoy, and there is a bit of rolling treatment for Danny Navarro as well at the back, the Cofidis team leader. I'm delighted to say that Robbie McEwen's popped in to say hello for the third time so far on this Tour de France, and what a good day to have you along as well, Robbie, because boy, is it quiet out there.
Afternoon, gentlemen. It has been somewhat pedestrian this stage, I guess you could say. But the thing is, a long, flat stage into a block headwind, there's not much more you could ask the riders to do. And at least there's been four of those gentlemen who've provided some light entertainment by getting themselves off the front. Yeah. Although just a minute now, it doesn't look like they're going to stay out there for much longer. And it's only going to be as long as the peloton lets them stay out there. But let's sort of look towards the fact that this final few kilometres will be amazing. I promise.
It's going to be frantic, isn't it?
It will be.
It's going to be dangerous as well.
When I drove in this morning before the stage even got underway, and I was thinking, yep, headwind all the way to the finish, so it's going to be pretty tough to choose position, and headwind is always very swirling in the peloton. And then I got to that final 3 kilometres and I saw that they were coming from the right-hand side of the road I was driving in on. And I thought, wow, look at this. The wind coming hard from the left, 90 degrees straight across the road, still blowing at 60, 70 kilometres an hour. I thought, this is going to be great.
That's at 3
We're just going to have to wait. We just have to wait a while for it to happen. But the last 3 kilometres, just over. So there's a corner at 3K to go. And that is full crosswind. And even up until 6K to go, they're in that same direction. Then they'll go straight into the wind between 6 and 3. But that last part, that can spell big danger, and it does spell danger for not only the sprinters trying to stay in position for the sprint, but GC contenders. So we're going to see everybody panicking, trying to be up there. So this final few kilometres is going to be action-packed.
Yeah.
And also at this point in the race, you've got to remember that there's such mix. The first part of the week, you have a lot of riders. Everybody's trying to be at the front. But at this point in the race, guys just sit up for no reason. They can be in 20th position, and they just sit up. They're like, this is too hard, I'm tired. And so everybody's going to be aware of that. And if it catches them out, we could see some random splits. And that also means they will know that because they have the recon cars ahead. But that doesn't stop the fact that some guys have got the radios out their ears and kind of aren't really caring and find themselves in a position where it can cause some splits.
Robbie, which two teams do you think, given the nature of the last few kilometres, are going to get on the front and try and dictate terms here? I mean, it'll be Ethics and Lotto, will it, those two?
Well, I think looking at that crosswind and the danger of splits in the peloton, don't be at all surprised if Sky come to the front and just ride such a high tempo to keep Chris Froome out of trouble. Because we've seen already in this tour, if there's a second to be lost here or there, Nairo Quintana has managed to do it so far. He'll be one in danger, and he will want to be following Chris Froome. When you look at the sprinters' teams, it'll be the sprinter who has the best organised team, the team with the most depth and the most numbers of guys they can use. Dimension Data, they're missing Mark Renshaw, a really, really important cog in the mechanism of Dimension Data team. Marcel Kittel has good guys, but not a lot of them for this situation. I'm thinking that Lotto Sudal will probably be the best organised, have the most numbers. Certainly, I think Andre Greipel is hungrier for a win than anybody else, and it's his birthday today.
It is. It is.
Do you agree that Lotto Sudal have been hitting out a bit early in the past sprints? They seem to always be the most... They keep getting hijacked by the other lead-outs. Do you think they're going to learn from that, or today they'll just keep ploughing on?
I think the wind will be in their favour, but they wouldn't want to be on the front from 6 through to 3, but you want to time your run in that headwind section. Very easy to get caught back too far, but with 3.1 kilometres to go from that corner, if they just stay together, they can always rectify the situation, get themselves back to the front, and they could start from 3, full gas, and they could pull the field to pieces, and it's better to be on the attack than trying to chase something down.
I suppose, given what David's just flagged up, the fact that that tactic now 3 times hasn't really paid off for them on a more normal sprinter stage, and without these wins being the factor that they are, they might have thought, well, actually, let's play a totally different tack. Let's bluff everybody into thinking we might, do the same as we've done and try something totally different. But now, this day might not be the day to do that.
Well, if they do the same thing, it'll be the wind that helps them pull it off if they can. What the other teams have been able to do, they know that Lotto Sudal always stick together. They've got strength in numbers. They ride very regular for Andre Greipel. That's allowed the other teams to sort of sit back, size them up, and then time their run with just a couple of guys. And they wait until it's even numbers, or Lotto have just got 2 left, and the other teams have got 3 left. Then they come over the top, spoil the party for them. But today with that crosswind, that could be the difference.
And if you're Mark Cavendish, Robbie, and people have often compared you two as in terms of the way that you sprinted, what would you do? Where would you, given that you haven't got the big train to rely on, you've got Edvard Boasson-Hagen and Bernie Eisel for those final few kilometres, principally, what would you do? Would you look at that wheel of Marcel Kittel and say, that's where I need to be?
Plan A would be following Lotto Sudal. Plan B, or A/B, because you might want to go from...
That's classic Robbie McEwen.
And you've always got to have it in mind. So use Lotto Sudal and their organisation to keep you well positioned, keep you out of the wind, essentially just be the next guy of the team, just wearing a different jersey. But as soon as the others go to make that move, let them go, ditch them, swap over to a team like Etix Quickstep with Marcel Kittel and look for someone to essentially provide you the lead out and try and just jump over the top of them at the last moment. Difficult sprint though, wind from the left, road bending around to the right. You only see the finish from 150 metres to go, and it slightly rises about a gradient of 1.5%. So a lot of complications to this sprint.
Don't go too early.
But go early enough, you don't get boxed in, because bending around to the right, if you're on the right-hand side, which they're likely to be, you need to be on the right to get some shelter from the crosswind. You can't wait there too long. You've got to make your move and make sure you can get out. You don't want traffic on your left-hand side, or you'd just be stuck there and not even do a sprint.
As we look at Marcel Kittel now, all these calculations are going through his mind. Just listening to Robbie McEwen, it almost sounds, David, as if sprinting's difficult.
Yeah, I know, but that was always the thing
much to do.
that I noticed with the great sprinters. I mean, you have lots of amazing guys who can put out the watts, who've got the horsepower, but they always found themselves stuck to a script. They had to have the lead out. They didn't have that. If it started to go wrong, they didn't know what to do. They'd have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. But Robbie McEwen and Mark Cavendish, that's why they compared Mark to Robbie a lot. It was plan A/B/C. It was just basically a lot of plan A's. You just jump so quickly between each one, and you can react. Those great sprinters just react so quickly, and they're not put off. They rip up the script in a split second.
Sometimes there was a plan, and the letter after it wasn't even recognisable as the letter of the alphabet. It was something that you just squiggled really quickly in your mind and just went with it. It becomes instinct. When you've done enough sprints, you recognise situations, you see how things are starting to evolve, and you preempt that, and you've got to go or switch, change your whole plan and go. And you've definitely got to go today before you see the finish line. But if there's a team strong enough to really string it out and keep it in one long line, then the last lead-out man, he needs to leave just enough room for his sprinter to slide through on the right-hand side next to the barriers, follow the shortest line around to the line. And if anyone wants to come over the top, they're not only going to have to get around that sprinter, but also go wide around the lead-out man, put themselves completely in the wind and ride that extra little bit of distance. So all these things will be playing through the minds of guys like Greipel and Kittel if they're able to lead out, and how they want their final lead-out man to play it, to let them through and not let anybody else come through that gap, and also force them a bit wide.
Yeah.
Wow.
Done.
Is that arguably, it's very hard to criticise a man with his extraordinary record, especially this year actually, but has that been Andre Greipel's shortcoming in the stages that he's contested so far, that plan A has been plan A and he hasn't looked further, he hasn't got plan Z?
It's pretty much been plan in this Tour de France, but that also says something about the level of the competition in the Tour de France. Kittel, Cavendish.
Yep.
Where at the Giro, we did see him manage to get out of some awkward situations a couple of times, but that was against guys like Modolo and Nizzolo. With all due respect to those guys, it's a different level, it's a different playing field here at the Tour de France. One small mistake here, you can't fix it as easy as you could in, say, one of those Giro sprints against those guys.
And are we right in thinking, I mean, the only sprinters we've mentioned since you came in and sat down and joined us, Robbie, have been Kittel, Cavendish and Greipel. Are we, is that naive of us? Should we factor in the two guys who have really shown themselves as potential stage winners here, Brian Coquard and Dan McLay?
Also, and I would put up there with them Alexander Kristoff.
Yeah, he's been frustrated, hasn't he?
He ran 4th in Montpellier the other day, so
hugely
behind
frustrated
Froome,
as well.
Sagan and Bodnar, who stayed in front. He won the sprint. He was really frustrated, and he looks to be getting better. And this is the type of strongman sprint that suits him.
Yep. Peter Sagan.
Peter Sagan. What sprint doesn't suit him?
Yeah, exactly.
Is the question.
It's also,
and he'll be up there bobbing around and getting those green jersey points. And when it's complicated and if it gets a bit messy, he's also very good at changing plans, because he goes in with pretty much just a blank sheet and just lets it happen.
To some extent, this does suit Peter Sagan, because he's not. I mean, that's that when he's in a little breakaway and everyone is sitting on his wheel. When Michael Matthews rolled him, that was a classic example of Sagan's shortcomings, if you can call them that for such a brilliant rider. That's when he is at his least confident, when everyone's expecting him to boss it. When he can sit in behind Kittel, Cavendish and Greipel, because they're the favourites, in those occasions he can thrive. The pressure's not on him.
There's more guys for everyone else to look at and consider, and they look at Cavendish and Kittel and Greipel and think these are the fastest guys on paper, so we've got to follow them and consider them more. And that gives Peter Sagan an opportunity to go and do the amazing things that he does.
It's also the fact by the time you get to the end of the second week and the third week, it's not like that first week. The sprints aren't the high-speed, massive, crazy things they were the first week. It becomes a lot more down to strength, like Kristoff and Peter Sagan. And even in the past, Mark Cavendish almost comes into his own in the last week. It's the first time we've seen him be so good in the first few stages. So the sprints do change shape now slightly.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And it's about recovery day to day. And there's a lot of riders out there now really starting to struggle with 2 weeks into this thing.
And there's the team car of Dan McLay, Fortuner Vital Concept rider, and do watch out for him in the final.
Well, you did mention him, and when things get messy, you saw how he solved that problem at the Grand Prix de Nan earlier in the year. Came from way back to win that. So if it's messy, Dan McLay generally knows which way to go.
Yeah. Again, though, with all due respect to that race and that great win, you have to relativise it, don't you? And you have to look at the riders who are finishing second, third and fourth. And the quality of this field is exceptional. The only sprinter missing, Robbie, and I'll just get your view before we have to go to a break, is Fernando Gaviria, really. And Caleb Ewan as well, your countryman. Those two guys are the inheritors on this generation as well. They're part of the pack now.
They're the up-and-comers, and they're doing great things. I mean, we say up-and-comers, but they're winning at things like the Tour of Poland at the moment. Gaviria's already won a couple of stages there. Caleb Ewan debuted as a professional and won a dozen races in his first season.
Sure.
So they're a bit better than up-and-comers.
No, they are.
They're guys that are already there. I mean, Caleb Ewan's won a stage in the Vuelta already. So these are the heir apparents to your Cavs and Kittels and Greipels, and there's always someone coming knocking on the door. Just when you think there's someone who's unbeatable, like there was Cav, then comes a Kittel. Then the Kittel's there, and somebody else pops up. And they're just going to keep on coming.
But isn't that what makes Mark Cavendish's renaissance so far in this Tour de France so exceptional? That, you know, he's basically moved the career trajectory and kicked it back in his favour.
Well, he's got it going again. We were saying he seems to be a little bit past his best, which is, I still think is true, but you've got to consider at 100% his very best. He was winning stages by 6 and 7 lengths. Now he's been winning in photo finishes and by much smaller margins. But the important thing is he's still winning.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he's a has-been.
Yeah.
I'm saying he's maybe just a couple of percentage points off where he was 09 through 2012, but he's still damn good.
He is, absolutely. Robbie, we're going to have to let you go. Just in a word, though, and I'm not sure you've got it right yet so far with your prognostics. Who's going to win?
Cav.
You know you're broadcasting the United Kingdom, don't you? Fantastic. Thank you very much, Robbie. Really appreciate your time again. So 39.3 kilometres to go. The 4 riders don't have much of an advantage. The catch is inevitable, and as Robbie McEwen has so beautifully elucidated, we are on for a big scrap and a big bunch sprint. I can't wait. Don't go away for long. Welcome back. The pace is definitely picking up. Cesare Benedetti heading the group of 4 who have a 50-second advantage. Just over 35 kilometres to go for them. But the peloton, as you can see from that time gap, is not too far behind. Lotto Sudal with Lars back are still working, but there's a proliferation of GC teams who are showing themselves a little bit closer to the front, including Astana. And Team Sky, of course, all wrapped around the yellow jersey of Chris Froome. The helicopter might reveal what that looks like on the road. Big, wide road here, battered by a headwind. That looks slow and hard, and those men have been out there since around about 28 kilometres into today's 208.5 kilometre stage. And there's the gap. So everything is pretty much all together behind. Riders dropping off the back, going and getting bottles for their leaders and bringing them back up around the peloton, which they can do with relative ease on these wide roads. One rider is no longer part of that peloton, though. Well, we've had 2 abandons actually on the road today. I told you about Matthias Frank abandoning from IM Cycling. Well, Matti Breschel, the Danish rider from Cannondale, he's abandoned too. And this is the bird park where the whole race finishes today. It's hosted 2 stage finishes of the Dauphiné already in 2013 and 2015. An individual time trial won by Tony Martin on that first occasion, and a bunch sprint won by Nasser Bouhanni the second time the race came here. So, bad news for Cannondale with one of their key domestiques going, Matti Breschel. And they're not having, I don't think, quite the Tour de France, David, your old team, that they would have hoped for. They certainly haven't made that. We're only on stage 14, so they'll have their plenty more opportunities. But I wonder whether they've actually got the riders to deliver the result that the sponsor would be hoping for.
I don't know. I mean, I think that all teams change. The majority of teams change. They're always in flux as different budgets, different themes and motivations of different sponsors. And I think Cannondale Drapac, as it's now known, has changed massively since its origins in 2008 when it started up as first of all Slipstream and then Garmin, which was the team I was on and actually a part owner of at the time. And it still has the same direction with Jonathan Vaughters and one of the part owners still Doug Ellis. But now Cannondale are essentially the biggest owner of the team, and even saying that, they've got one of the smallest budgets in cycling in the World Tour, and that has compromised the riders they can purchase, because that's what it comes down to always is how much money you have to spend on riders. But they did lose they let Dan Martin go last year, who'd been there since 2008. He'd become a professional with as it was known, Slipstream, and yet Jonathan Vaughters let him go, and now we see Dan Martin just getting better and better. He wins classics. He's now proven to be a GC rider, which is quite baffling. And they replaced him with Rigoberto Urán, the Colombian, who is a fantastic rider, but we haven't seen at his best for a few years, and Pierre Rolland as well, who I think they hedged their bets on those two as being their future GC riders, and unfortunately it hasn't panned out, which does sometimes happen. And they're left with now hunting stages and breakaways like this today with Alex Howes. And we'll see. They have a wonderful bike rider in the team, Ramūnas Navadauskas, the Lithuanian, who's the national champion, the Lithuanian national champion, who we can, well, it's quite difficult to pick out, but he's in the centre at the back with the helmet and the white jersey.
An aero helmet,
yeah, he's wearing
a yellow aero helmet and a white jersey.
Yeah, and he's already won a stage. He saved their Tour de France in 2014 by winning the penultimate stage, and it might come down to him for them to essentially cut the leash, if you like, and because he's been a domestique to so many different riders in that team so far this race, they should maybe cut him free and allow him to chase stages. But there aren't many left to go.
Yeah, Pierre Rolland did launch a little bit of an attack on the lower slopes of Mont Ventoux, but it didn't last more than about 2 or 3 minutes, and it was over, and then he was out the back. So Rolland's legs aren't there at the moment. Doesn't look like for a stage win. Something he's done on the Tour de France before. And where's Andrew Talansky in all of this?
I don't know, because I think, he was at the Tour of Switzerland. I think he finished 5th or 6th there on GC, and they decided not to take him to the Tour de France and put him in as the leader for the Vuelta a España, which is the next Grand Tour after this. Begins August the 20th, so I think he's probably altitude training and getting ready for that, because they obviously made a calculated decision that he couldn't compete with the best here on GC, and they'd let Pierre Rolland have that responsibility. But again, we're yet to see if Talansky lives up to what the team obviously believes he can do. I think. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't think so. I think he's a wonderful Grand Tour rider, but more your sort of top 10. He can do a top 10, which is amazing, but he's not necessarily a podium Grand Tour rider. Not at Tour de France. He might be able to the Vuelta. I think if everything went well for him, he could possibly do top 5, maybe get a 3rd on the podium at the Vuelta. But the Tour de France is a whole different kettle of fish.
Talking of which, that's the regular diet of these fellas. Pelicans?
I think so. I only know them from Finding Nemo.
Exactly. This is part of the bird park, where today's stage finishes, and before we launch off into the Alps again tomorrow. Not a summit finish tomorrow. They go over the Colombier and down to a descent. So it finishes downhill tomorrow. Interesting to see Movistar towards the front with a couple of riders in front of Nairo Quintana. So they're clearly a little bit twitchy at the moment about the weather conditions and the wind. And as the pace goes up and things do thin out, and the changes of direction in the final 10 or so kilometres of this race, there is a risk that there'll be a GC race being thrown into the mix here as the sprinters' trains try and line things out as well. And it was interesting to see, with all the different teams moving to the front now, that last time we got a shot of him, Chris Froome was actually dislodged from that primary position in the top 15 or so riders with all his team around him, and he was just a little bit further down the pack, because a number of other teams on those wider roads had taken the opportunity to come right up to the front, and 3 or 4, maybe 5 distinct little trains had opened up at the front of the peloton now.
Again, you see often with other riders when they're in the leader's jersey on a day like this, they may drift back a little bit and use it as a day off, if you like, and float around maybe in the middle of the peloton, maybe have some conversations with friends and enjoy the moment. But we see just the motivation and why Chris Froome is a repeated Tour de France winner is because he's not switching off even on a day like this. He's been near the front most of the time. We've had images, we've always seen him up there with the team. And that's what it takes to win the overall of the Tour de France. You don't get to switch off. You don't have friends, essentially.
And there is that Movistar train I was referring to. The man just in front of Nairo Quintana is Imanol Erviti, who's by far the most experienced rouleur, if you like, the man for the flat roads, who can operate and keep his team leader safe in crosswinds. But that's about all that they've got in terms of pure men for the flatter roads, and Nairo Quintana has come a little bit unstuck again on the Tour de France. In similar fashion to last year, he's lost, in inverted commas, unnecessary time to Chris Froome. That said, it doesn't appear at the moment, at least, with plenty of climbing still to come, as if Nairo Quintana's mountain legs are quite there either for a serious challenge. So, not a perfect race so far from Movistar.
No, it isn't. Obviously, they put so much into Nairo Quintana and their belief in him, rightfully so, and it's not quite going to plan, which does happen sometimes, and they're going to have to consider going back to the drawing board regards his preparation. He didn't do the big preparatory races that we're used to seeing the contenders do. Dauphiné, Tour of Switzerland, he went to the Route du Sud, and maybe that was the wrong decision.
Yeah, a bit of a stealth campaign from Nairo Quintana to this point, as we look down at the flamingos of the bird park. they will be blissfully unaware of the fact that the Tour de France is descending hard and fast on their territory. Not long to go now, and the bunch sprint is brewing up nicely. Welcome back. Not too long now, I think, before the breakaway will finally been caught. It's been a tremendously long day out for them, 180 kilometres if they stay out all the way, but surely they won't do that. 25.9k to go, and look at the advantage. Well, it's almost inevitable now that the chase, even though they might not want to catch them at this point, it's developed a momentum and a pace that will mean the destruction of this gap pretty quickly, I would imagine. Sometimes that's just in the course of things, and that's the way it works out, David.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's quite interesting that today there's no games being played by the Peloton. I mean, you could just tumbling down now, 16, 17 seconds, 25k's to go. It's almost like the break is irrelevant to the Peloton. You can see how strung out it is, and I think a lot of that comes down to, as Robin McEwen said, the threat of the little bits of crosswind as the direction changes. You can see just there that glimpses as we're looking at the Johns Dam. We're not seeing actually the Peloton being stretched out and elongated, which does indicate that the race is on. And I think that's got as much to do with GC positioning as much as the sprint trains just trying to position their sprinters.
25 kilometres to go for the quartet up the road. They've got a tiny advantage now because finally the race is on in earnest behind them. The sprinters trains and the GC riders trying to keep their men exactly where they want to be at the front. Remember that the wind is still very strong. All day it's been a headwind, but there are long sections, and especially in the final 10k, and most specifically the final 3 kilometres today, where it will howl across them right from left to right, essentially from west to east. Sorry, from north to south as they head east. And that is a danger point, not only for the sprinters in terms of positioning, but for the likes of Nairo Quintana, Chris Froome et al., Adam Yates, and Bauke Mollema. So Trek, Orica Bike Exchange, Movistar and Sky might well be taking their men all the way to the Flamme Rouge today, rather than just getting them through the 3 kilometre marker and then just relaxing.
And it's interesting to see Dimension Data up there, positioning Mark Cavendish, and it's probably quite a similar tactic to what we saw Direct Energy doing, in that they're aware they haven't really got the arsenal of weapons to do a massive lead out, and so they're going to do as much as they can while they can, and at the moment this is a perfect time for them to be helping Mark Cavendish, because when it comes to the last 5k's they've only got 2 or 3 riders that can really help Mark Cavendish.
Well, we're looking at down at La Dombe, and these are the trademark ponds here all across this part of the world, actually man-made but ancient. They were dug out by monks in the Middle Ages for fish stock, so fish farming has defined the nature here and the way that the landscape still looks even to this day. And that's the way the race looks. It's been looking a bit like this, or as if this was an inevitability, pretty much all day. And you can see now there's no holding back from the 4 riders. They realise that they want to just stay out there for as long as they possibly can, and so this is a full-on effort now from Jérémy Roy on the front from FDJ, and Alex Howes, you can see the effort telling too. And look at that flag, look at the wind direction, it's right in their faces again. It's a brutal day.
It'll be interesting to see if one of these riders attacks off, tries to break it up in order to get the last prize on offer for them, which is the combativity award, the right to wear the red number tomorrow. And I have no doubt that perhaps one of them will try that, because it will be quite hard to differentiate between who's been the most aggressive of those 4 unless one of them actually launches something just before they're caught now.
Yeah, well, these 4 have contested 2 King of the Mountains. They've shared them out a little bit. Alex Howes took the first and Cesare Benedetti took the second. Benedetti, the man who's just looked over his shoulder with the red helmet and the white and black jersey on, he also sprinted for the intermediate sprint at Lafayette with 63k to go. So up to this point, you would have to say Benedetti's probably been the most combative, but it's normally given by the people who decide these matters to the rider who's last man standing in a breakaway.
Often that is the way, unless there was a battle that went on very early. I have a feeling they went away quite early. We didn't get to the images of the breakaway. Yeah, it's actually true. That's
Jérémy Roy was the first rider to attack, and the other 3 came across to him, so that might get him over the line. And he's French.
That's obviously probably who's going to win it.
You get to stand on the podium, you get on telly, you get interviewed, you get your brand all over the networks, and that's part of professional cycling as well. Of course it is.
And as it has been quite a quiet day. We're going to look into some other facts, not just Chateau, but this is actually the 50th day that Team Sky have held the yellow jersey. 14 days that Bradley Wiggins wore it, and this is the 36th day that Chris Froome has worn it. So that's very impressive considering the...
Well, you consider Raymond Poulidor didn't do it once,
yeah,
and he's a legend.
Very impressive.
How will Chris Froome be remembered by history? Who knows, really? We'll have to wait and see, obviously, but he's honing in on a 3rd Tour de France victory. At least it's looking that way, isn't it? After 2 nearly perfect weeks of racing for him. And his display of running panache on Mont Ventoux, I think, in terms of his public image, at least for those who are minded to cut Chris Froome a bit of slack and admire his achievements, I think it's up the ante and given us a fresh perspective on a man who is a born racer. A closed book to many people, Chris Froome. Those who don't know him, those who do know him, will tell you that there is a remarkable human being lurking away beneath that manicured, polished, diplomatic surface. He speaks his mind, though, on occasions, when he wants to.
Yeah, he does, and I think it's often the way with these champions, and that they're very capable of holding a mask, but occasionally that mask drops and we see it. And I think Mont Ventoux was one of those moments where we really got to see the essence of Chris Froome. It was all about the race. He didn't care about what he looked like or what people thought. The finish line was what mattered.
Essence of Chris Froome. There's a marketing opportunity for him, his own brand of perfume.
A running man.
So 21.5 kilometres to go, and they have them firmly in their sights, don't they? And that's one of the reasons why they might have just eased off a bit. Let's just hold fire, because as soon as it does come back together again, then the whole race is open to teams getting on the front and splitting it up, to the possibility of counter-attacks, remote though that seems, in a race finish like today. And this nervousness will continue with the winds and the changing in direction, especially in the final 10K.
Well, it's a little bit of a stalemate at the moment, and you see that the Peloton is just holding the brake there. They brought that chunk of time down quite quickly, the last minute that they've been holding there, and now they're just leaving it there. They're using that breakaway as their gauge, the speed the Peloton rides at, and these 4 are pushing forward because they have nothing to lose now.
Alex Howes, Jeremy Watt, Martin Elmiger from IM Cycling, and Cesare Benedetti. Who is going to attack, and when will they be caught? That's the question. 21 kilometres of racing remaining. Mark Cavendish has his team pretty close to the front on the left-hand side of the road. Dimension data looking very positive today. Direct Energy as well, looking after Brian Cockard there on the front. So a number of teams vying for supremacy with 15 seconds the gap. That's all that they have. Welcome back. The agony continues for the 4 riders out front. The peloton has decided to be kind to be cruel, so to speak. The advantage was down to 15 seconds and it's gone out again. They don't want to catch them just yet, so on and on it goes for Alex Howes, for Martin Elmiger, for Cesare Benedetti and for Jeremy Watt. Watt was the first to attack on the day. He went at about 28 kilometres. The other 3 bridged across to him, and they have been battling the Mistral of all winds all the way up the Rhone Valley, and now they're just within 17.2 kilometres of the finish, but they're not going to be allowed to contest the stage win among them. That much is clear, but their advantage now goes out again to 38 seconds. There was a lot of momentum in the pack earlier as big GC teams like Movistar and BMC came to the front, and alongside Dimension Data and some of the other sprinters teams, and it gained an almost unstoppable seeming momentum of its own, but they've put the brake on a bit and they've realised that they don't want the catch right now. That's often the case. You see the breakaway almost caught, and then it goes out again, but nonetheless they have them exactly where they want them right now, and it's just agony for the 4 riders who are wondering when they can finally sit up and declare their day done.
Well, in a way, it's a bit better than being caught now and feeling like your day was a complete waste. Even though they understand the futility of their situation, that doesn't stop them hoping that maybe something happens and they do make it, and that they can believe that now. You can see we haven't seen them look this animated the whole day. They they know how close they are to the finish, and the gap's going back out, and I think even that gives them a little bit of hope that something's possible.
You've just described the human condition there, David. They understand the futility of their position, but that doesn't stop them hoping.
That's bike racing.
It's philosophy. And that is dimension data. And somewhere behind that pack, you can see the figure of Mark Cavendish just lurking behind Daniel Tekla-Hymenaut. He's got his men on the front. He's got Bernie Eisel alongside him. And it's not been the model so far on the Tour de France in any of his wins to have his team on the front and dictating terms. But today's run-in, and particularly the final 10K and then the last 3K, might involve a different tactic. And the smart thing to do today might well be get on the front and make sure that you stay on the front if you can do it.
No, and also when it's a headwind like this, it's often the battle behind can be massively exhausting and dangerous. Now, when you're at the front, maybe he's just decided, look, I know it's a headwind, let's have the team up here and just keep me up there in a safe position so I don't have to endure the battle and the danger of being behind. Because you can see how close everyone is packed. Normally 15Ks to go, it's a little bit more strung out and at higher speed, but because of the headwind, it slows everything down and it compacts the bunch. And everybody who's on the wheels, they feel like they're $1 million, and they think they can do anything, and they keep nudging out the way and pushing. It goes back to what Peter Sagan says about the lack of respect. You have people up there who are pushing you around when they shouldn't be, and so Mark Cavendish is probably just getting himself out of there and using up his team where they can help him.
Fantastic crowds through this village, taking them through 15 kilometres to go before breakaway men, still in inverted commas, enjoying their day out, led by the experienced Swiss rider Martin Almega, 37 years of age, Jeremy Watt, who's got a second place on the Tour de France to his credit and a stage win of Paris-Nice. Benedetti and Alex Howes, his second high-profile breakaway, and the last time he was up the road in a move, Mark Cavendish ended up winning the stage. So Mark Cavendish has declared himself on this Tour de France, to all intents and purposes, the fastest man in the world once again in stage races, with his 3 stage wins to Marcel Kittel's 1. But he's also a rider who handles himself in the bunch with unparalleled accuracy and cleverness.
Yeah, he does, and that's why we compared him to Robbie McEwen, because Robbie McEwen, he never really had big teams, big lead-outs. He often found himself in a situation where he was on teams that where he was almost a bonus rider. They had a very big classics team or something else, and he'd turn up to the Tour de France without a lead-out train, as we've grown used to seeing in recent years in the Tour de France, and he'd jostle around. And as Alex Howes is slightly distanced.
He is, isn't he? Just beginning to find it really tough now. The man from Cannondale Drapac, the young American, 28 years of age, and just losing contact with the other 3. They have gone, and he's not giving up, Alex Howes, and Jeremy Wise driving them on at a furious pace, proving probably to be the strongest of the men so far, and definitely looking to get away on his own, with one eye on the Prix de la Combativité, no doubt the most aggressive rider of the day. He kicked it all off, did Jeremy Watt, and Alex Howes is the first man to suffer at his hands. Yeah, it was Watt who first attacked today, at a point where we feared they might even roll in together all the way without a breakaway, which is a very unusual thing in a race. But it was a distinct possibility today, given the conditions.
No, it was, and there were even rumours that they were going to have a protest to neutralise the race. There's always these rumours and things go around, but as I heard somebody say, it was a headwind, it's a natural protest. They'll just sit there and just use the day as an easy-ish day. But Jeremy Watt has obviously seen differently. As we can see, the bunch accelerating, trying to BMC, trying to move up and place Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen. They're only riding for that. They're only riding for GC. They're not interested in the sprint finish. They just want to make sure that their 2 GC riders are in the right place and not caught out. Dimension Data are doing the same, but they're doing it regards the stage and for Mark Cavendish. And in the middle, you can see Direct Energy, who are doing it for Brian Coquard. And then you have Saxo Bank and the Luminous Yellow doing it for Peter Sagan. So we have 4 teams at the front there who are really trying to look after their team leaders.
Mutual admiration society between the moto pilots and the helicopter pilots. French television have 2 helicopters in the air just now, hovering over the race, delivering some fantastic shots as ever. Through the cornfields they go, and spread out in a different direction. This is what I mean about the road now switching through 90 degrees every now and again and exposing them to different wind conditions. It's very constant, the wind direction. It's due north, but as you can see there, it's coming across the road from left to right, and this is a danger point.
I wouldn't be surprised if you just see Thomas de Gent sit up soon, and because he's got another big day tomorrow in order to defend his climbers jersey, and so he might just think, oh, 13Ks to go, I don't want to go too far in the red now, I'm just going to sit up and roll in.
Yeah.
So which is normal at this point in the race. See quite a few riders do that.
He's still turning the pedals with intent, Alex has, but he knows now that it's all over for him. Daniel Tekla-Heimnot leads the chase from Dimension Data. They're all over the front. There's Mark Cavendish, just a glimpse of him peeking out from, I think that's behind Bernie Eisel's wheel, as ever. The yellow jersey of Chris Froome, well, they're just lined up behind the BMC train on the right-hand side of the road. But you can see by the single-file nature of the back end of that tail, the peloton is significantly quicker than it has been almost all day, and there, that proves the point. 45 kilometres an hour they're travelling at now. That's much more standard fare, and it's fully 12 kilometres an hour faster at this point than it was for the first hour or two of racing today. So they're motoring now, and it is Dimension Data who still have control of the race, and two races apparent on the roads. The race for the stage win on the left. There you have Dimension Data with Ethics Quickstep and Marcel Kittel on their wheel, alongside Andre Greipel and Brian Cockard. And on the right side, you've got Movistar, Sky and BMC. That's the GC order of things.
It's Serge Pals for Dimension Data on the front now, so you can see how the roles flip around. When it was the Mont Ventoux stage, he was allowed to go up the road and have his own day, and ended up finishing second on the stage to Thomas de Gent. But now it's back to normal, and he's working for Mark Cavendish and doing his role as a domestique. But again, like we were saying, it's a slight change in tactic for Dimension Data. We're accustomed to seeing Lotto Sudal being much more present at this point, and maybe they have changed their tactic today, and we'll see them coming back later with only a few kilometres to go. And Ethics Quickstep, we're used to them leaving it as late as possible. They'll work during the day, control the break, but when it comes to their final lead out, they're very cool and calculated and storm it in the last few kilometres. And maybe Lotto Sudal are going to attempt that today. But we see, as usual, Mark Cavendish is changing his tactics constantly depending on the conditions and the race.
Daniel Tekla-Heimnot retakes control of Dimension Data, and BMC still have Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen right where they want them, at the front of the train on the right-hand side of the road. Whittled down now, the group of breakaway riders, by the absence of Alex Howes, and there's just three of them up the road. And Angel Vicioso leads the chase for Katusha. Alexander Kristoff motivated, no doubt, by his sprint for the minor placings on the road to Montpellier. He came fourth on that occasion when everyone was outwitted, or was it fifth in the end?
Fourth. Geraint was just
right.
Caught up in the last 100 metres, but
effectively
yeah,
won the sprint that wasn't a sprint.
And we saw how angry he was, because I think he genuinely felt like he was the strongest, and he probably would have been if it had arrived in a bunch.
34 seconds, and we're approaching this danger point, especially at 9 kilometres to go. That's where the road does look as though it's exposed to crosswinds. Very straight up until about 5.5k, and then for a couple of kilometres they turn into a headwind before turning right-handed again in the final 3,000 metres. So 3 kilometres are exposed to a crosswind. Very straight, though, to the finishing line from there. That's how far we are from the High Alps, down in the Département de l'Aisne, where the race finishes today. So 10 kilometres to go for three riders who have eluded the catch for slightly longer than we might have imagined. They had them right breathing down their necks with about 15-20 kilometres to go, and then the elastic was stretched out again. Jeremy Roy forcing the pace. That put paid to Alex Howes. He dropped away, but Benedetti and Elmiger are able to live with the man from FDJ, who looks full of intent today, and he's had a very, very strong ride, and a reminder of what this man can do as well. Elmiger, huge figure, sitting on the diminutive figure of Cesare Benedetti. Total mismatch. Benedetti's got a tiny bike.
Yeah, but he's held his own well on what is a flat and headwindy day, and actually he's probably had the most benefit in that when he's on the wheels of the other guys, he's getting a massive draft, a massive slipstream, whereas the riders with him are taking a bit of beating from the wind when they're sitting on his wheel. So he's probably had one of the best days.
Thomas de Gent in the polka dot jersey, one of the last riders to go through that dividing point from the roundabout, which split the race asunder. And on one side of the roundabout, you had Katusha and Dimension Data as, well, it's Elmiger. It decides to light things up a little bit and push on. Benedetti's the next rider to be put into trouble by that acceleration, but Wallett's comfortable on the wheel of the IM cycling man. So I think that's the end of the day for Benedetti. He'll try, but it might be beyond him to get onto the wheel of Elmiger, who'll just time trial his way on the front now. I think Wild's going to go over the top of him fairly soon, though. Or will they work together for a few more kilometres?
No, I think you're right. I mean, they're clearly the two strongest of that breakaway. So it's not really been massive tactical attacks. It's just been turning the screw at the front. It's what Jeremy Roy did to lose Alex Howes, and Elminger just did the same then. It was obviously it was a big move, but it wasn't a spring jumping attack from a slow speed. He just wound it up. And but after a day at the front in the headwind, that's all it takes. Everybody's tired, but these two clearly are the least tired of the four of them.
All that remains of the breakaway, two men. 50% of their numbers have gone. Cesare Benedetti, in these appalling headwinds that they're battling, is the next man to go off the back and be swallowed up by the bunch imminently, and that was due to the acceleration of Martin Elmiger from IM Cycling. Jeremy Roy reacted really well to his move, though, and he is right on his wheel. And these two, for the time being, still sharing the work and still staying off the front. And still, they have 30 seconds inside the final 10 kilometres. 8.4 to go for the two leaders. And that is the site of the peloton, still split on the left-hand side by all the sprinters' trains and on the right-hand side by BMC lining out the main men in the general classification. We're with Jeremy Cousin from Cofidis, and I think he's on the wheel of Nairo Quintana at this point.
He's got Chris Froome just on his right.
And the yellow jersey alongside him. So good on-board camera work there from Jeremy Cousin, picking out our main contenders, or at least Chris Froome is. Don't know whether we can still call Nairo Quintana one of the main contenders for the Tour de France this year. The Alps, that's where we're heading pretty soon, and that's where Quintana, if he's going to do anything, has to really show his form and his hand, and it has to be better than what we've seen so far. Cesare Benedetti flings a bead on to be picked up, no doubt, by a fan standing by the side of the road. The man from Bora Argon, 18, is the next rider to be pulled back in. And these two remain, 7.7k, and they're giving a tremendously good account of themselves.
Yeah, they're holding a respectable gap now. They're just sitting there. It's around 30 seconds, as they have been for the last 5Ks. Frank Schleck, who's just had a puncture by the looks of it, but it should be no problem. The bunch, although moving, isn't in full flight quite yet. The lead-outs haven't begun, and the full convoy's there, so you can just get in the cars and be calm and jump from one car to another. But here we have Katusha, who have taken, it's the first time we've really seen them taking control of the bunch like this. So Christoph obviously is motivated. We have next to them Dimension Data. BMC have been up there for a long time, and Sky are profiting off that. They don't have to sit there. They're just sitting on the right-hand side of the road behind BMC and letting them do all the hard work for Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen, which is good for Chris Froome, as it means he'll still have fresh guys left for when he needs them.
And that's how the Tour de France is being received today. Bright sunlights and wild applause. That's what we want to see. It's what the race is all about. And this is what the race is all about for these two men. They have 7 or so kilometres to hold on, and something like a 30-second advantage. They will be caught, I'm sure of that, but they still stay out there. And it's a wonderful spectacle as the bunch bears down on them with almost complete inevitability.
They've only got a kilometre left or so till they do this 90-degree left-hand turn, which gives them about 2 kilometres until they do another 90-degree but right-hand turn. So it's a bit like a big dog leg. So they'll all be quite nervous about positioning themselves well in there, hence why we see the GC teams all at the front and the right, and I said sprinters teams on the left, because they don't know exactly how the wind's going to affect when they turn left. Although they can feel the wind, they don't know exactly how that will affect the peloton when they hit it. So they just want to be safe and make sure they're at the front when they do that left. As we just saw on the screen there, the left-hander that they'll take.
That's the road in front of them as Sky now do move to the front. Ian Stannard, who is battered and bruised but still in the race after that horrible fall when he was brought down by the loss of control of Simon Gerrans, who's abandoned the race. Well, Stannard's still in it. No broken bones for him, mercifully. And Luke Rowe and Geraint Thomas are the men all around the yellow jersey of Chris Froome. One rider I haven't seen just recently is the white jersey of Adam Yates, I should say. The man who sits in the podium position, 3rd place in the general classification, and Bauke Mollema as well. Don't forget him. Where is he?
See how open it is across the big ponds there. It's which they'll have all been warned about, and you can see the window, so it's on the right, so that could cause something, we'll see, but that's a real crosswind section, but that does also mean it will be more headwind into the finishing straight again, which will make for a dangerous sprint. So all the sprinters teams will really be trying to place themselves and make sure they can stay there for as long as possible, because it will come down to who's got the coolest head when it comes to the sprint trains.
Well, that's right. Actually, given the way that this wind is blowing across this course now, this is the danger section, because this is where it's exposed to crosswind. So I think the wind direction might have changed somewhat, but you can see the intent now on Luke Rowe's face, and the yellow jersey is very, very attentive, just sitting tucked in the middle of the Katusha train. So it's a bit of a mixed picture. Things are getting a bit messed up. Riders are looking around, trying to find themselves and get their sprint trains and their GC trains organised again.
You can see it won't last long, because they know they're going to this forest and then it'll be protected again. So it's just very open, and you can see how it's stretched out there. So the back of that's Frank Schleck, who's made it back on, but at the worst possible time, because now it's probably going to splinter in front of him.
Definitely forcing the pace. Peter Sagan looks like it's barely turning the pedals. 5k to go. The green jersey moves to the front, and that's not the place you'd expect him to see him. Actually, he is Andre Greipel for company on the right-hand side of the road. Sagan, I think, if he's planning to feature in the final sprint today, probably doesn't want to be on the front right now. Tuck himself in and ride a bit more stealth, if that's possible, if your name is Peter Sagan and you're wearing the green jersey. 10 seconds, that's all that Watt and Elmiger have now. Lotto Sudal, that's where we expected to see them. They've got one or two riders towards the front. I think Adam Hansen's moved up to the front.
So you can see Chris Froome's placed brilliantly. He's got Luke Rowe and Geraint Thomas. So they're the only two riders he's left. Understandably, in Stanners out. Kirienka's not there. And as Lotto Sudal moving up there. So that's Andre Greipel in the second position, third position, the white jersey. So they have left it a bit later than they have in the past, Lotto Sudal. But have they again made it too early? Because the moment they turn right, with just over 3Ks to go, it's going to be a block headwind. So that's going to use up riders much quicker than it would usually, so probably wants to wait even later.
Well, they will have done reconnaissance. They will have sent staff members up on the road to feed back information about the way the wind is blowing and turning across these long, straight but direction-switching sections of road. And I'm sure they know what they're doing, but Lotto Sudal have decided to get on the front and dictate terms, as they have done repeatedly for Andre Greipel, who so far, as you can see, a group just off the back of the peloton. Don't think there's any big names in there. Certainly nobody riding with any intent, so they're just rolling into the finish.
In Stannard.
They're all okay. They've done their jobs for the day, and another group off the back. It's unexpected at this point, but that's how hard it is. Dimension Data have a rider on the front, and now the catch is happening. The handshake between Martin Elmiger and Jeremy Watt. They've had a good day out, and those two were distinctly the strongest of that quartet who got up the road. Watt, I am sure, has made a big statement to the people who decide the Prix de la Combativité, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's on the podium at the end of the day and wears the red number. Tomorrow, meanwhile, Dimension Data, working for Mark Cavendish, and Katusha, working for Alexander Kristoff, are the two sprint teams on the front.
That's it, just sets it up perfectly. So now this is the direction they'll maintain to the finish lines. They've got 3Ks now, and this is where it's going to get interesting, because they've gone from that crosswind to a headwind again. So you might see it stall, because nobody wants to be sitting out there trying to control that, because if with a tailwind, maybe a rider could do a kilometre on the front. With the headwinds, they're probably down to 500 metres. And you can see Katusha, they just sat there, they've slowed it down slightly, trying to pace this perfectly.
Well, Cofidis have a lot of faith in Christophe Laporte. They've got Geoffrey Soup, the man with the beard, in the red jerseys of Cofidis, just sitting in front of their main sprinter. Of course, last time a race came here, the Dauphiné, it was a victory for Nasser Bouhanni, their sprinter, who isn't here. But they're going to improvise with Christophe Laporte, who's shown himself to be very strong so far. Meanwhile, Ethics Quickstep have got themselves organised. There's a pinch point, a few riders going onto the grass. None of the big sprinters disrupted by that, I don't think. The yellow jersey almost caught out, but he'll be okay. I think Chris Froome will be able to get back on and make contact and work his way up to the front of this race. 2.3 kilometres remaining. Julien Vermont is on the front for Ethics Quickstep, so they've got their men where they want to be. There's no sign of Lotto Sudal at the moment. Where's that white jersey of Andre Greipel? Which wheel has he found at the moment?
Which will be the right move for Lotto Sudal. Maybe they have understood they need to wait a little bit later and just pace it perfect. It's Wilco Kerdeman for Lotto Youngbo, who's been dropped off. He was very disappointed by his time trial yesterday, and perhaps that's just being displayed there.
You can see the black aero helmet, black and green aero helmet of Dan McClay, who's very handily placed with one teammate just behind the Ethics Quick-Step train as they move over to the right-hand side of the road.
And look at that, that's what you do. They felt the wind was being more effective, it was coming slightly from the left, so they're going to move over. That's why Tony Martin said move to the right, because they don't want to protect anybody else. They just want to protect their rider, and hence why they had to move to the other side of the road and block the other teams from coming up and using their slipstream. But now we've still got no sign of Lotto Sudal. Mark Cavendish sitting there perfectly. He's on Edvald Boasson-Hagen's wheel, so that's good. We still don't see Lotto Sudal or Andre Greipel, so maybe they're playing the perfect tactic. They've changed their plan completely, but now it's something they don't do usually, so it'll be difficult for them to pull off.
Look which wheel Dan McClay has identified. He's sitting on Mark Cavendish's wheel, so it's Kittel, Cavendish and Dan McClay, and now Lotto Sudal make a big move down the middle of the road. They move over to the left-hand side. Andre Greipel has 3 men with him. They've gone early again, Lotto Sudal, and they've hit the front as they pass under the Flamme Rouge. It's all about Lars Bach and Jürgen Roland setting things up once again for a move from the German national champion. Andre Greipel takes them through with his team 1 kilometre to go.
So they changed their tactic completely. You could see there, instead of just dragging it out, they launched it with just over a K to go, but Andre Greipel had to do a big acceleration to stay on their wheel as Katusha move up. Direct Energy are there, and Ethics Quick-Step only have 2 riders left.
So of the big favourites, it's Andre Greipel on the front now. Marcel Kittel has 1 rider in front of him still. That's Fabio Zabatini. It's still Mark Cavendish sitting on the wheel of Marcel Kittel. Yet once again, Cavendish is obscured behind the huge frame of the German. Alexander Kristoff and Peter Sagan not far behind them. Watch out too for Dan McClay. He is in the mix too. Sam Dumoulin from AG2 A La Mondiale trying to get on terms. And still, Cavendish sits on Kittel's wheel. He's done it before. Is he going to do it again? Cavendish goes round the German, and Cavendish tries to hit the front. There's an almighty battle. John Degenkolb is in the mix, and Marcel Kittel complains about the action of Mark Cavendish there, but that, at this point, will matter little to Mark Cavendish. He punches the air. He thinks he's taken a 4th win. He certainly won the race in terms of getting over the line in 1st place, but will there be a complaint from Marcel Kittel? He certainly looked aggrieved.
Well, there's certainly a complaint, but he has no right to, because Mark Cavendish was coming round him, round the outside. He had the barriers, Marcel Kittel, and it was Marcel Kittel. I just think he realised he was beaten. Now Mark Cavendish, he did come in slightly, but I think there's no conflict there. I don't think he has the right Marcel Kittel to claim anything against Mark Cavendish.
4 fingers in the air. What a Tour de France of triumph this is for Mark Cavendish. Yet again, he's delivered, and yet again, he's got round Marcel Kittel.
And we'll see Mark Cavendish comes round, and Marcel Kittel had the inside. Now he comes in slightly, but he doesn't really change his line much. Now I don't think he was already coming by Marcel Kittel. It was 100 metres to go. Marcel Kittel's race was effectively done there. I don't think that was a racing move. It wasn't an aggression. It wasn't a deliberate to try and take out Marcel Kittel. He was already done.
Alexander Kristoff rolled in 2nd place. I think Peter Sagan was in 3rd, but Mark Cavendish's margin of victory once again was emphatic. Well, you never say never in cycling, and you never say with any certainty that the result will stand until it's been confirmed. But no doubt about the first man over the line today. Mark Cavendish managed to take the victory over the line, and there were big protests from Marcel Kittel. Mark Cavendish, though, the first man over the line.
And hard to see what Marcel Kittel really has to complain about. Mark Cavendish's 4th win. We think it should be confirmed after the break. Welcome back. Mark Cavendish turns 30 in Tour de France years, and this is how he did it. You can see Marcel Kittel complaining behind him. We don't think he's got much to complain about, and Kittel ended up 5th. There you are. You can see the results. Cavendish first, Alexander Kristoff, a frustrated man, again 2nd, Peter Sagan picking up more green jersey points 3rd, John Degenkolb up in the sprints, good to see him back, 4th place for him, Kittel 5th as we said. Then it was Greipel, Coquard, Chimolai, Laporte and Sami Dumoulin. Well, since every day seems to bring controversy, David Miller is with us. David, let's clear up the controversy. If there is any controversy to clear up, I'm not sure there is.
I don't think so. I mean, we saw basically Mark Cavendish came off Kittel's wheel
Kittel had the inside. He had that whole section of road. Now, because it was turning slightly right, they were going out. But him coming in, Cav, he never really took Marcel Kittel's line. So I think there's nothing to be claimed. You can see here, so Marcel Kittel's lead-out man is about to pull off. Now, the road curves slightly to the right. Now, Marcel Kittel has to go now. So he starts his sprint, and he takes it to the right-hand side of the road because it's curving. Mark Cavendish, he's staying in his wheel. He's got John Degenkolb, who's great to see on Mark Cavendish's wheel. Christoph on his wheel for Katusha. Peter Sagan in 5th. Now look, Mark Cavendish launches off to the left. Marcel Kittel's still got open road in front of him. Mark Cavendish doesn't take his road away from him. He's coming up, he's in the centre road. John Degenkolb coming up, so Christoph Sagan there.
Slightest hint of a flick
slightest
there.
hint, but look, Marcel Kittel still has that whole section of road that was his to own. So I don't think that Mark Cavendish has done anything wrong. I think it's just frustration from Marcel Kittel that he's been beaten again.
And almost a hint of exaggeration after the fact by Kittel, as if to, almost a footballer's dive to say, ref, he got me.
Well, I think that's normal. I mean, it is frustration. It's so the adrenaline's pumping there, and he knows he's beaten. He knows he's just watching Mark Cavendish coming around, and I think he made a little bit of what the French would say, a little bit of cinema.
Right. Well, we hear that the UCI are looking at the pictures, but I mean, I don't think it's home bias. It looks like a formality to us, but we'll wait and see. And Cav, you would have to think, after 4 stage wins, it would be a brave man from British Cycling who called him up and said, hey Cav, remember that agreement about coming home early to prepare for Rio?
It's going to be that's a very difficult decision to take. That I think the British team already made their decision in selecting Cav, which is already a little bit controversial because they knew he was doing the Tour de France. The rest of the team is training specifically for the Olympics, but Mark Cavendish, he's back at his best, and you can't take that away from him. And I think, if he stops now or if he stops in 1 week, what difference is that going to make? I think he's already too deep in. In my opinion, I think he should stay to Paris, but that's me. And he's got the sprint knowledge and the track knowledge. It's a gamble.
And the lure. I mean, he used to own that Paris finish, and then the past couple of years it's been taken away from him by Kittel and Greipel. So he'll want to re-establish himself on the Champs-Élysées, won't he?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he already has re-established himself. We're watching each time how he's back to the old Cavendish in many ways, and the fact he was able to get on Marcel Kittel's wheel, which is the battle royale for the sprinters to get there, he's on there and looking quite comfortable about it. So, and they're obviously behind the podium, sort of waiting to see what's going on.
Yeah, so looks like he's got it. And you mentioned it, John Degenkolb in 4th place, which wouldn't be massively impressive in normal circumstances, but it wasn't the kind of slightly uphill ones that he likes. But for people who don't know, he was injured in this awful training crash for Giant Alpecin back in January. So, great to see him up there.
And there he is. He's the rider on Mark Cavendish's
wheel. The nodding dog.
And the nodding dog. And we haven't, as you say, this isn't the sort of sprint that really his style normally. He prefers the much harder days where the other sprinters are dropped. But to see him back up there doing this, it's fantastic because his finger was severed in that crash at the beginning of the year. So to come back and be at this level in the end of the second week in the Tour de France is fantastic for him, and I'm really happy for him because that couldn't have been an easy period.
Yeah. And still nothing for Katusha this year. We heard after the Montpellier stage, there was a very aggrieved tweet from Joaquin Rodriguez who said, well, the team abandoned me to ride for Christoph. So if they have abandoned him to ride for Christoph, they need a result sometime sooner or later.
Well, Christoph was second today, so that is a result. He's getting closer, and I think the sprints in the last week, he's a fantastic bike rider. He's much like Degenkolb. These are the strong sprinters. These are the guys who recover, and they're starting to move up. We're seeing them, and no doubt they'll be the riders that Cav will be battling if he's here in Paris.
Yeah, and Lotto didn't hit the front quite as soon. Well, he's walking away from the. Let's just. Well, if he's going to get the official winner's interview, I think it's probably official that he's the winner. But we'll perhaps hear from Cav. We've overrun already, as I'm sure you know, so we're going to have to get off air pretty soon. We'll see if we hear from Cav. We'll probably won't see the presentations. They'll be in the highlights. But Lotto Sudal tried to vary it a little bit today, but evidently Greipel just doesn't really have it this year.
No, I think they changed their tactic completely, in that we've seen them in the first few days. They were hitting out, in my opinion, too early. With 10Ks to go, they've seen the team on the front, and it was very obvious from the helicopter shot and what we could see with just over a K to go. They came from nowhere. We didn't see the Lotto train. Then all of a sudden, 3 riders came firing up, but it was too big a gap for Greipel. I think he wasted most of his energy trying to get to the train, and then, because it's not something they do usually, they got it wrong.
Yeah. Mark Cavendish, meanwhile, was in the perfect position right on Marcel Kittel's wheel. Came past him. We believe fairly. Let's hear from him now.
Congratulations. Can you take us through that final kilometre?
We knew we had to be there. It went narrow, or narrower, even narrower from like 6k to go, and we had to be at the front in that narrow section. It was a little bit crosswind there. And Bernie Eisel, the guys, you see them riding the last 40k to keep us there. With Daniel Teglerheimer and Serge Powell. That was after Nat and I was riding the whole day, and then Bernie kept us there for that narrow road, and it was about jumping the train to the end, actually. Yeah, Reinhard Jans van Rensburg, he's not very experienced. He needs Bernie to guide him there because Bernie did an earlier job. Reinhard actually, he messed up for us. He started loud, nice on Kittel, and he brought the other trains past. And I thought, this is it, like, it's finished. I followed Kittel. Edvald stayed there, made sure I was there. We got through. And then obviously I seen them hit out quite early, quick steps. I knew Kittel would be left on the front quite soon into this headwind, so I just had to wait, let him die and then come round him, jump round him, and then obviously it's bearing to the right. He's kicked off a little bit, but I was way past him, like, so I don't think there's anything wrong. I think he's just frustrated. I won for he hasn't. So
Congratulations.
And we believe the result is official now. And David, astonishing. I mean, I'm astonished when I hear you in commentary, but for Mark Cavendish to come straight out of that sprint and recount it in forensic detail like that's amazing.
He's always been able to do that, and it's one of the things, every sprint he can analyse and basically break it all up immediately afterwards. And if you talk to him about a finish from 5 years ago, he'll recount it completely in absolute detail. And that's what makes him good, because if he makes a mistake, he learns from it and doesn't do it again. And that's perhaps something the other sprinters don't have.
Okay. Well, Mark Cavendish, it's official, has his 4th stage win of this year's Tour de France, his 30th in his Tour de France career. Sensational stuff. We will see him on the podium when we come back with the highlights at 7.